Number 5. Union Graveyard. This specific cemetery is located near Stepney Road in Easton, Connecticut, and dates back to the 1700s. According to ghost hunters, it is one of the most haunted cemeteries in the entire United States. The most popular ghostie is the elusive White Lady, popularized partially thanks to Ed Warren having an obsession with her and possibly catching footage of her. Some believe she is Harriet Seeley, whose young son passed shortly after being born, and Harriet herself passing soon after. Legend believes she may have died in hopes of finding her son, and still wanders their final resting place searching him out. Others believe she is the ghost of a woman from the 1940s who killed her husband, and later herself, and is doomed to wander the graveyard. Her physical description is the one thing that remains consistent. She is a young woman wearing a white dress with dark hair. It seems as if she enjoys scaring the daylights out of the living, so my kind of gal. Many who have witnessed her believe they have almost hit her with their vehicle, only to find no trace of her once they pull over. Others claim they have often seen her hovering slightly above the ground around the cemetery, going back and forth amongst different gravestones. In 1993, local firefighter Glenn Powell received a call about a transformer explosion and drove to the scene of the incident with a police officer and observed a female driver following closely behind him on the road. He remembers the night sky had turned pink, and the explosion emitted large amounts of electricity that made the hair on his arms stand up at quite the distance. Glenn was driving along the road beside the cemetery when the officer seated next to him yelled, "Watch out!" In the middle of the road was a woman with long brown flowing hair and wearing a white Victorian nightgown. Glenn described seeing a surprised look on her face before slamming on the brake, but was unable to avoid hitting her, describing it like hitting a brick wall, with the back of his truck flying into the air and the policeman next to him being launched into the dashboard. The driver behind him jumped out of the car and helped the two men search the area of the crash to check on the woman, but she was gone. Glenn is quoted as saying there was no sign of bodily fluids, there was no clothing, there was nobody, there was nothing. Now, Lorraine Warren used to often take walks through the cemetery, saying that it was one of the most haunted places around. Ed caught the White Lady on camera on September 1st of 1990 at 2:40 a.m., which was his 7th night in a row of filming at the cemetery. Determined to have proof, and described dark figures surrounding her, shapes that he thought were wood ghosts that seemed to jump on her while they all argued. Now, the Warrens have also referenced a red eyes ghost, so a pair of red eyes which they claimed can be seen in the forest behind the cemetery, not to be confused with bike reflectors that locals have placed within the grounds to scare teens. The famous duo claimed the eyes belonged to Earl Kellogg, a man who was set on fire across the street in 1935. Number 4. Highgate Cemetery. Highgate Cemetery is located in North London, England, and was assigned by architect Stephen Geary. There are approximately 170,000 people buried in around 53,000 graves across the West and East cemeteries for context, and today's tale has to do with vampires. In 1967, two teenage girls were walking home along the nearby Swains Lane and claimed to have witnessed the dead rising from their graves by the cemetery's north gate. Another teenager had been awoken one night with something cold and clinging on her hand, which left prominent marks the next morning, while reports circulated of a tall man in a hat walking in the area before melting through the cemetery's walls. On Halloween night of 1968, a group of teenagers interested in the occult visited Tottenham Park Cemetery, at a time when it was being regularly vandalized by intruders. According to a report in the London Evening News on November 2nd, the teens arranged flowers taken from graves in circular patterns with arrows of blooms pointing to a new grave, which was uncovered. And by that I mean a coffin was opened and the body inside was disturbed. But their most macabre act was driving an iron stake in the form of a cross through the lid and into the chest of the corpse. In a letter to the Hampstead and Highgate Express on February 6 of 1970, David Farrant wrote that when passing Highgate Cemetery on Christmas Eve of 1969, he had glimpsed a gray figure, which he considered to be supernatural, and asked if others had seen anything similar. Sean Manchester claimed David's gray figure was a vampire, and the media quickly latched on, embellishing the tale with stories of the vampire being a king of the vampires or practicing black magic. See, king of the vampires? That's my kind of guy. A rivalry grew between David and Sean, with each claiming that he could and would expel or destroy the specter. Sean declared that he would hold an exorcism on Friday the 13th of March, which, you know, it's a good spooky date for that sort of thing. ITV conducted interviews with both men, and others who claimed to have seen supernatural figures in the cemetery, which were transmitted early on the evening of the 13th, and within 2 hours, a mob of hunters from all over London and beyond had swarmed over the gates and walls into the locked cemetery, despite police efforts to get them the heck out of there. Some months later, on August 1st of 1970, the charred and headless remains of a woman's body were found not far from the catacomb, believed to have been used in a black magic ritual. David was found by police in the churchyard beside the cemetery one night in August, carrying a crucifix and a wooden stake. He was arrested, but when the case came to court, it was dismissed. There was more publicity about David and Sean when rumors spread that they would meet in a magician's duel on Parliament Hill on Friday the 13th of April in 1973, which never occurred. The vampire is said to lurk until this day, so maybe I'll have to make a trip eventually to pay my respects, if you get what I mean. Number 3. Hollywood Forever. The Hollywood Forever Cemetery is one of the oldest in the state of California and is located on Santa Monica Boulevard. Many famous individuals are buried in the cemetery, such as Rudolph Valentino, Mickey Rooney, Anton Yelchin, and Judy Garland. First used in 1899, it features well over 50 acres of land for families and visitors. There are still thousands of spaces available and new mausoleums being completed, but it's time to talk about the ghosties. It should also be noted that Paramount Studios is located near the cemetery, and it is said to be one of the most haunted movie studios of all time. So let me know if y'all want me to ever elaborate on that. I'll start with the obvious, and I think the most dedicated fan ever, the Woman in Black. Also, yes, my bias for unknown ghostly ladies, known only by their outfits, is coming into play. This is why I choose to always dress up, because I'd personally hate for my last outfit to be my raggedy PJs. What do you think? Would this be a good final resting outfit? If not, I'm open to suggestions. Rudolph had passed away at the age of 31 in 1926 after surgery from an ulcer, and over 100,000 people gathered outside the funeral home. Fun fact, there were rumors that a wax replica was used to protect the body at the service. He was quite the popular heartthrob at the time. Heck, I'm racking my brain for like a modern day equivalent, and I'm failing. Just imagine your celebrity crush, but everyone also liked that same crush to a crazy level. It wasn't until after he had been laid to rest that the Woman in Black began to appear, and mainly she likes to come out on the anniversary of his death, dressed from head to toe in black, including a veil. She would leave roses on the grave and was originally thought to be Pola Negri, the woman he was engaged to during the time of his death, but nope. Many women have come forward claiming they are the Woman in Black. However, none of these claims have turned out to be true. Alrighty, ghostie number 2, Miss Virginia Rappy. On Labor Day in 1921, Virginia had attended a party for Mr. Roscoe Arbuckle at the St. Francis Hotel, which was held to celebrate acquiring a very large contract. Sadly, at that very party, Virginia had become sick and mysteriously passed a few days later at only 26 years old. Now, many claims were made surrounding her death, including the possibility of Arbuckle taking sexual advantage of her, a claim that was later proven false but sadly had negatively affected his career. No one knows exactly what happened to her on that fateful Labor Day. Around the site of Virginia's grave, folks have reported the temperature dropping to an icy cold climate, and have also heard what appears to be sobbing. Many believe that she is still dealing with this traumatic event, with many visitors clearly seeing her weeping on the edge of water that is located on the grounds. I'm sure there are plenty of other ghosties, so let me know if anyone knows of any that I might have forgotten. Number 2, Resurrection Cemetery. Located in Chicago, this cemetery is the home of a very well-known ghostie, Resurrection Mary, who is also commonly referred to as B-L-O-O-D-Y Mary. Blame the interwebs for the spelling out. Has different origins, depending on who's telling the story, but the most shared narratives put her untimely death sometime in the late 1920s to early 1930s, when she was either a victim of a fatal car crash on the way to a night of dancing, or the unfortunate victim of a hit-and-run accident while she was walking home in the rain. Most documented reports of Mary describe her as a young, fashionable blonde woman, no older than mid-20s, wearing a white ball gown, accessories, and a hairstyle to match. The first person who claimed to encounter Resurrection Mary was a man named Jerry Pallas. In 1939, Jerry was at a popular dance hall when he was love-struck by a young blonde woman. He approached her, and the two hit it off and spent the night dancing away, even sharing a scandalous kiss. According to Jerry, her hands were as cold as ice, but he had a warm heart that made up for it. So, eventually, closing time came around and Jerry offered the woman a ride home, and she asked to be taken down Archer Avenue. She motioned for Jerry to stop in front of the Resurrection Cemetery, and when he did, she got out and vanished before his eyes. Jerry was shaken with disbelief, but not too frightened to seek out answers. The next morning, he made his way to the address where Mary said she lived, over in Southside. He knocked on the door and encountered her mother. Now, when Jerry asked about the woman he had met the previous night, she informed him that she'd been dead for nearly 3 years. It turned out that, yep, Jerry had encountered Resurrection Mary, and over the next few decades, several other men would have similar experiences. But that was the one that began the legend. One cab driver in the 1970s claimed to see a young woman standing in front of the Resurrection Cemetery one night, and he pulled over to check to see if she needed a ride, and as the woman approached the vehicle, yep, she disappeared. Another encounter with Mary occurred in 1979 when a separate cab driver named Ralph claimed to pick up a young female hitchhiker he believed to be no older than 21. As the two drove up Archer Avenue, she suddenly jumped up and said, "Here, here." The car came to a sudden stop and the woman pointed to a small abandoned shack off of the left side of the road. Now, Ralph questioned whether this was actually where she wanted to go, but before he got an answer, she disappeared without ever opening the door of his cab. His encounter was detailed in a 1979 issue of Suburban Trip magazine, and in 1980, Claire Rudnicki and her husband Mark were driving down Archer Avenue towards the cemetery when they spotted a young woman in a white gown slowly walking down the side of the road. Now, it was immediately obvious that she wasn't an ordinary person, as she was partially transparent with a white aura around her, almost as if she was glowing. Shocked, the couple wondered if they had just seen a ghost, and when they once again reached the spot where Mary was walking, you guessed it, she was gone. Mary is supposedly buried at this cemetery in Justice, Illinois, about a 30-minute drive southwest of Chicago, and it gives her stomping grounds as well as her iconic name. She likes to stick to that particular stretch of road on Archer Avenue, between the cemetery and what was once the O. Henry Ballroom in Willow Springs. Over the years, several researchers have tried to determine the exact identity of Mary, but no one knows. Due to the number of sightings and the credibility of those who claim to see her, Resurrection Mary is said to be one of Chicago's most famous ghosts. Number 1. Stull Cemetery. Stull Cemetery and the abandoned church that rests next to it is located in the tiny, nearly forgotten Kansas town of Stull. Oh, and it's believed to be one of the 7 portals to hell. So counted among the most haunted cemeteries in the world, Stull Cemetery has gained a haunted reputation due to a legend that involves Satan. The legends say that these stories have been linked to Stull for more than 100 years, but none of them made it into print until the 1970s. Specifically, in November of 1974, an article appeared in the University of Kansas student newspaper that spoke of a number of strange occurrences in the Stull churchyard. According to the article, Stull was haunted by legends of diabolical, supernatural happenings, and the legends claimed that the cemetery was one of the 2 places on Earth where the devil appears in person 2 times each year. Apparently, most students learned of Stull's diabolical reputation from their grandparents, or, other older individuals, but that many of them claimed first-hand encounters with things that could not be explained. One student claimed to have been grabbed by the arm by something unseen, while others spoke of unexplained memory loss from visiting the place. The legends also say that the devil has been appearing here since the 1850s, and insists that the original name of the town was Skull, and that the later corruption into that of Stull was simply to cover the fact that the area was steeped in black magic. In 5th place, we have Pendel Hill. Also known as Penhull, Pendel Hill is located in the Lancashire countryside, near the villages of Burnley, Colne, Paddingham, Clitheroe, and Nelson. Pendel Hill is famous for George Fox's Visitation, the Quaker movement leader in 1652, and the barometer experiments of Richard Towneley in 1661. I feel like I'm missing something else they were famous for. Let's see if I can get the gray matter in here working. Oh, right. It's home to a very famous witch trial. Locals to the area know very well the story of the 10 women executed for witchcraft at Pendel Hill in the 17th century, who, still haunt the area. The story of the Pendel Witches is an excellent example of a well-documented allegation of witchcraft. So this tale begins way back in the year 1612, when there was said to be a family of local peasants who lived in a vast limestone tower. However, the family was no ordinary family. These peasants had enormous powers, and were reported to be in league with the devil. According to reports, the family made clay effigies out of teeth and human hair. In a coincidence that's going to surprise absolutely no one, local people died of various mysterious illnesses or great pains at the time. The milk in the area turned sour, and cattle died mysteriously as well. People were kind of afraid to go up that hill. A local magistrate, Roger Norwell, made the decision to arrest 2 people living in the tower. They were brought to Lancaster for trial, and 2 days later, the rest of the witches were arrested and also taken to Lancaster for trial. Out of the 12 folks on trial, 1 passed during the proceedings, another one was found not guilty, and the other 10 were, very much found guilty. On August 20th of 1612, all 10 accused witches went to the way of the rope necklace at Gallows Hill. The history of the witch trials has given the place an eerie atmosphere and several terrifying reports. Pendel Hill was featured on the show Most Haunted, during which several supernatural events are said to have taken place, including members of the show's crew being injured. Most of the ghostly activity is said to be out of spite from the witches, who continue to call Pendel Hill their cursed home. One tale of haunting in particular took place during a Ouija board experiment. Is my disdain showing yet? The stupidity was happening in the foundations of Malkin Tower, when a tooth suddenly landed on the center of the table. Now this caused everyone present to be extremely concerned, and after having obviously checked to ensure that nobody in the group had lost a tooth, which was, definitely human, it left the folks involved in a quandary as to how it got there. The tooth was eventually identified as belonging to an adult of around 40 years of age, and was in fact an old tooth. And if a league of ticked-off witches wasn't enough ghosties for y'all, a Bronze Age burial site has been discovered at the hill's summit. Just a little bonus. In 4th place, we have Stirling, Scotland. This beautiful market town has played a pivotal role in the history of Scotland, along with playing host to multiple grisly stories and, unsettled spirits. The imposing hilltop, Stirling Castle, is home to several ghosts, and I'm struggling to decide who to talk about in detail. Probably one of the mysterious ladies. Oh, I know, the Green Lady. It is believed that she was a servant girl in the employ of Mary, Queen of Scots, and a very gifted one at that, who was blessed with the powers of foretelling, or second sight. So this maiden had a premonition that if her queen slept even one night within the ancient fortress, she would not live to see dawn. So she told her mistress of the fears, and thankfully, Mary listened and offered to allow the girl to watch over her as she slept, and, call for aid should any threat present itself. Through the long, dark night, our servant gal sat, bundled in a great soft chair guarding her beloved queen. Weary from a long journey, Mary fell fell into a deep slumber as soon as her head hit the pillow. And this girl too was kinda weary. She barred the door and, lighting a taper, sat by the bedside. There she sat for what seemed like an eternity, near hypnotized by the flickering of the taper's end. But, try as she might, she could not resist the weariness in her bones. Her limbs grew heavy, her eyelids heavier still, and decided, that maybe closing her eyes for a minute wouldn't hurt since she was so exhausted. Hey, we've all been there. But what seemed like no more than a few moments, she opened them again, blinking against the sudden brightness of the chamber. She, through bleary eyes, tried to call out, but found her throat so dry and realized that the tiny taper, set so carefully by the queen's cot, had fallen, lighting the bedclothes and tapestries on fire. Coughing, she darted from her chair, gathering the deeply sleeping queen in her arms, and carried her towards the door, barely managing to get her to safety before eventually passing from smoke inhalation. Sadly, her name has been forgotten. She is known only by the color of the gown she wore, the Green Lady. So visitors to Stirling should be mindful that their female phantoms have one thing in common. Yeah, I said phantoms, plural. It is said that whosoever looks even once into their eyes won't make it through the night. So if you notice like a ruffled robe or a well-turned spectral heel as you're passing around, turn away, avert your gaze, because you don't want to risk your soul. Some say that Queen Mary herself haunts the castle, roaming the grounds in a pink dress. The Darnley Coffee House on Bow Street is also said to be haunted by a mischievous poltergeist, while the Old Town Jail is home to the spirit of the last man that went the way of the rope necklace on site. In third place, we have Edinburgh, Scotland. So the beautiful city of Edinburgh is well known for its ghostly activity. For starters, the South Bridge vaults are haunted by several different ghosts. During the Irish potato famine of 1845 to 47, thousands of Irish folks immigrated to Scotland seeking, survival. Forced into the vaults under the bridge, as many as 10 people lived in a single room. The conditions were poorer than the tenants, crowded and damp with barely any air circulation. And just like that, the area quickly became Edinburgh's red light district. Services of the night, please tell me you get what I'm referencing, gambling, and a thriving black market were commonplace in the vaults. By the late 19th century, the vaults were closed off for good in an effort to drive the seedy activity out from under Edinburgh's main thoroughfare. For decades, these vaults sat empty as their icky past slipped into obscurity. Obscurity that ended in 1998 when a local man crawled through a narrow passageway in one of his buildings and rediscovered the rooms underneath the bridge. Since then, the cavernous vaults of Southbridge have been open to the public, and the reports of ghosts have poured in. Honestly, what have I said about leaving hidden spaces that are blocked off be? Nothing good comes from opening them. Witnesses have claimed to feel cold gusts of air, hear voices, and to see and sense an intangible presence. Some ghosts are quite bold, like the, spectral youngling Jack, who likes to grab visitors' hands in the wine vaults. Just for funsies. While another more menacing presence is known as Mr. Boots. He's an unkept man that was named for his, tall footwear. He lurks in the back section of the vault and has been known to push and throw rocks at visitors. Some have claimed to hear his footsteps on the cobbles and his echoing voice cursing throughout the chambers. It's even rumored that in the 1820s, the infamous serial killers William Burke and William Hare lurked within the vault, killing some of their 17 victims there, and storing the bodies in that same location until they were sold off for medical dissections. Visitors to Edinburgh Castle also frequently report sightings of apparitions. A young piper who disappeared without a trace hundreds of years ago can still be heard today, with the faint, haunting sound of a lost soul. As well as the story of the vanished piper, the dungeons are frequented by a headless drummer boy and a gaggle of French prisoners captured during the 7-Year War, who are regularly sighted in and around the castle. If you hear the bark of a dog in Edinburgh's Old Town, yet there's nothing there, it could be Bobby, a phantom Skye Terrier that is known to all in the city. The faithful hound spent 14 years guarding his master's grave until he finally passed away in 1872 and was buried in Greyfriars Kirkland, near his owner. People still hear his little bark near his grave. A small statue of Greyfriars Bobby is a popular landmark on the corner of Candlemaker Row, and it's good luck to rub Bobby's nose. Aw, here I am tempted to plan a trip, mainly to give a good ghost doggy a pet. Oh, almost forgot. Greyfriars is a graveyard that dates back to the 16th century and is the resting place of several infamous characters, but the most gruesome story is that of Bloody Mackenzie. Look, the interwebs really don't like when I say that word, so bear with me here. This wealthy lord was tasked with punishing hundreds of prisoners who refused to change their religion. Locals believe that the ghost of Mackenzie haunts the graveyard after his tomb was disturbed by a homeless man who broke into the graveyard at night. As soon as he laid hands on the tomb, the floor opened up beneath him and he dropped into a shallow grave containing plague victims. Since then, many other freaky episodes have taken place nearby. A woman was found unconscious with bruises around her neck, and many claim that it was Mackenzie's poltergeist, continuing his evil deeds in death death as he did in life. No biggie. In second place, we have Canterbury Kent. While this medieval city might be aesthetically stunning, it has quite the dark past. The ghosties here tend to be a little more spread out than other places, and have different tales. So let's have fun with some short and sweet descriptions. For starters, Canterbury Cathedral, a pilgrimage site for centuries, is the home to many restless spirits. Archbishop of Canterbury was famously and brutally killed by the King's Knights in 1170. Becket's place of death has a large welded cross above it with 2 swords. His tomb can be found near the high altar, where his apparition still appears to visitors. Other cathedral ghosts include a nun and the ghost of Simon of Sudbury, who was the Archbishop of Canterbury from around 1375. Other paranormal hotspots in Canterbury include Tiny Tim's Tea Room, haunted by the spirits of 3 younglings whose remains were found within the walls during restoration. And hey, if you hang around Hawks Road, you might glimpse Abigail, a sad soul who frequents the area. Another spooky house in the area is the Bishop's Finger, which is located on St. Dunstan Street. In the 19th century, a housekeeper by the name of Ellen Bleen discovered that her employer, a priest, was having an affair with a younger woman. It is said that Ellen poisoned the pair with a meat pie and then vanished from the city. Shortly afterwards, it was discovered that she had been buried alive as her body was found nearby. Ellen is said to wander the streets and manifest herself in the Bishop's Finger every Friday. She's described as, plain-faced, larger lady in a long white skirt and a mob cap. There are more haunted places in Canterbury, but sadly, I don't have all the time I would like to go into more detail. In first place, we have the village of Pluckley. Included in the Guinness Book of Records as the most haunted place in Britain, the Kentish village of Pluckley's popularity amongst ghosts and ghouls had to make it the #1 spot on our list today. Wandering monks, decapitated highwaymen, and all manner of central casting spirits reside here, but special attention should be paid to the particularly gruesome story of the Pluckley watercress lady. Seen smoking a clay pipe and living on the banks of the river about a century ago, the woman would sell watercress to the locals and drink gin from a flask. My kind of lady. Falling asleep one evening, it is believed that her pipe scattered ashes onto her rags and she burned to death. So nowadays, a pink glowing specter can allegedly be spotted at the exact location where she went up in flames. Now, before someone asks why this place is scarier than the others on today's list, other ghosties who frequent in the town include the specter of the highwaymen who hide in a tree at Pinnock, a phantom coach and horses who pop up in several areas around the village, the ghost of a Romani woman who drowned in a stream, a miller who has been seen at Mill Hill, the hanging body of a schoolmaster in Dicky Bus's Lane, a colonel who hanged himself in Park Wood, a man smothered by a wall of clay who drowned at the brickworks, the Lady of Rose Court who is said to have poisoned herself in despair over a love triangle, the White Lady, a young woman who was apparently buried inside 7 coffins and an oak sarcophagus who haunts St. Nicholas's Church, but not to be confused with the Red Lady, reputably a member of the family who haunts the churchyard of St. Nicholas's Church. Oh, and a small white dog has also been reported in the same location. Now, I don't know about y'all watching, but that's a few more ghosties than I'd like to see in a smaller town. And the fact that they like to roam and not stay in one spot? Hard pass. In 5th place, we have the Winchester Mystery House in San Jose. Fun fact, California tends to easily be one of the top 5 most haunted states out of the entire United States. And it was a struggle today not making another list with purely locations from, California. The origins for this crazy tale begin in 1881, when the passing of Sarah Winchester's mother, father-in-law, and husband, William Winchester, of the famed Winchester Repeating Arms Company, all happened in under a year, leaving her with a very large inheritance, assumed to be around $20 million, and a 50% stake in the company, making her one of the wealthiest women at the time. If $20 million doesn't sound super rich to y'all, in today's money that would be about $561.6 million. Chump change, right? After living in Connecticut for the majority of her life, an arthritis diagnosis and meeting with a medium convinced Sarah to start a new life in California. She believed her family to be cursed by victims of the Winchester rifle and began construction on what was originally a 2-story, 8-room farmhouse, which she purchased in 1886. She and her late husband shared an interest in architecture, and after dismissing all of the architects she originally met with, Sarah decided to do all of the home planning herself. She was known to rebuild and abandon construction if anything didn't meet her expectations, which resulted in a maze-like design. It is believed that said maze-like design was mainly intended to confuse and keep spirits from harming her and what was left of her family. According to paranormal investigators Mary Jo Ignoffo and Joe Nickel, the bell tower built on the property was used to summon spirits, and Sarah was known to throw lavish parties for the beings she feared in an attempt to please them. It was reported in the San Jose News in 1897 that a 7-story tower was torn down and rebuilt 7 times. Honestly, I respect the attention to perfection, knowing what you want, and having the money to be able to not settle. As a result of her expansions, there are walled-off exterior windows and doors that lead to nowhere, along with staircases that end suddenly, and as the house grew in size, size, up to 5 additional levels were added to the home. When the 1906 San Francisco earthquake hit, the damage to the home was quite extensive, causing the collapse of the 7-story tower and most of the chimneys. An entire wing was destroyed along with the 3rd and 4th story additions, and pipes began protruding from what were once window boxes. Before the earthquake, the house is believed to have had 500 rooms, and at the time of Sarah's passing in 1922, the house had 160 rooms, 2,000 doors, 10,000 windows, 47 stairways, 47 fireplaces, 13 bathrooms, and 6 kitchens. Visitors to the house today have reported multiple instances of experiencing cold spots, footsteps, cooking smells, odd sounds, whispering, doors and windows slamming, and feelings of being watched. Honestly, I still kind of want to visit it. In 4th place, we have Myrtles Plantation. Located in St. Francisville, Louisiana, and built in 1796 by General David Bradford on top of a former burial ground, this domicile is believed to play home to at least 12 different ghosts. So brace yourselves for a highlight reel. Our first ghosty story begins with a newly married couple, Mr. and Mrs. Clark Woodruff. Mr. Woodruff was a cruel and harmful man and owned numerous indentured servants, which was the icky norm at the time, and one in particular that he liked to, punish went by the name of Chloe. Now, Chloe tried to protect herself from the wrongful punishments by listening in on the Woodruffs' conversations and modifying her behavior, which, is kind of brilliant. Sadly though, one day after being caught eavesdropping, Clark had one of Chloe's ears cut off. Her mutilation was hidden, at the demand of the Woodruffs, by the use of a green turban. Even though most folks wouldn't see the damage, the painful experience would stay with Chloe and inspire her to make plans for revenge. On the 9th birthday of the Woodruff's daughter, Chloe placed poisonous oleander leaves into the cake, intending to only get them sick so she could nurse them back to health and earn a favor with the family. Desperate times call for desperate measures. Tragically, the dosage was lethal, and it ended up killing the missus and the offspring. After word spread of her actions on the plantation, the other servants were the ones to take revenge. Chloe was hanged by the neck for everyone to witness until the life was drained from her body, and then her body was weighed down by rocks and thrown into the Mississippi River. Multiple visitors to the current location have reported seeing the transparent and ghostly apparitions of a young girl wearing a green turban moving throughout the property. In 1992, the owner took a photo that they believe captures Chloe's spirit. This photo was originally intended to be used to secure an insurance policy for the home in case of fire or other natural disasters, not to prove paranormal activity. The presence of a human figure within the photo was undiscovered until it was developed. Many tests have been done to verify its authenticity, but make sure to let me know in the comments what you folks think after seeing it. Alrighty, what's next? Oh, the next owner of the property, a wealthy family man, and his 5 wards would pass away from tuberculosis on the property. The home was later passed to one of his surviving daughters and her husband, the Winters. Mr. William Winter was a proud member of his community and taught Sunday school out of the home. So one day, as William was teaching, an unknown man rode up on a horse yelling to see him. And as he came out to address the man, he was shot at point-blank range on his front porch. William retreated into the home and staggered partway up the stairs before passing away in his wife's arms on the 17th step of the staircase. The sound of his strong and forceful stomps still linger in the home today, as visitors report hearing heavy footsteps from empty staircases. The overall paranormal activity became more noticeable in the 1970s once it was purchased by the Myers family. Oh, right, remember how I mentioned it was stupidly built over a burial ground? The ghost of a young Native American woman has been repeatedly spotted fluttering about. During the Civil War, the house was ransacked by Union soldiers, and legend claims that 3 were killed in the house, leaving a scarlet stain in a doorway, roughly the size of a human body that cannot be removed. In 3rd place, we have the Crescent Hotel. Located in Eureka Springs, Arkansas, it was erected in 1886 and has served several purposes over time, such as a luxury resort, a conservatory for young women, and a junior college. But the strangest mark on its history came in 1937 when it got a new owner, Norman G. Baker. Norman was a millionaire inventor and radio personality who decided to pose as a doctor despite having no medical training and wanted to turn the hotel into a hospital that could cure cancer? He was eventually found out and was run out of town, but his spirit somehow found its way back to the hotel and found some otherworldly company as well. The now operating Crescent Hotel is said to be haunted by at least 8 ghosts, ranging from a small girl to a bearded man wearing Victorian clothing. When current owners Marty and Elise bought the hotel in 1997, they hired 2 certified mediums to do a reading of the building. The mediums found that the hotel showed signs of being a portal to the other side, as in a dimension that holds the spirits of the dead and can be accessed by those on the same frequency as ghosts. That portal is located on top of what used to be the morgue. One one thing I like to stress, especially when dealing with angry ghosties, is to never disturb the graves. And a formal archaeological dig was done on the property in 2019, uncovering Norman Baker's bottle grave, with some of the glass containers clearly showing fleshy remains, while others are believed to have held his assorted curing potions that never cured anyone. If you'd like to see them for yourself, they're on display in the Crescent's morgue. Oh, I totally forgot. The morgue, complete with autopsy table and a walk-in cooler where Baker stored cadavers and body parts, are open for public viewing. The experience comes with seeing the ghosts of younglings huddled under the morgue's autopsy table, pleading for help, the reoccurrence of a Baker patient who also served as a hospital assistant being seen in and around room 419, better known as Theodora's room, the early morning loud squeaking of wheels in the third floor corridor, accompanied by sightings of a nurse pushing a gurney full of corpses down the hallway, only to see it vanish into thin air. In second place, we have Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia. The castle-like penitentiary took solitary confinement to new levels when it was built in 1829. Prisoners lived alone, exercised alone, and ate alone. When an inmate left his cell, a guard would cover his head with a hood so he couldn't see or be seen. Now, the prison had to abandon its solitary system due to overcrowding from 1913 until it closed in 1970, although the forms of punishment did not get any less severe. Current reported paranormal happenings have included, disembodied laughter, shadowy figures, and pacing footsteps. Yeah. Elaborating now. Cell Block 12 is known for echoing voices and cackling, while Cell Block 6 is known for shadowy figures darting along the walls, and Cell Block 4 tends to have visions of ghostly faces. Many people have reported seeing a silhouette of a guard in one of the towers. Oh, and that might not sound weird, but there's no way to physically get to the top of the tower today, since the brick stairs crumbled away, many years ago. One of the more legendary tales comes from Gary Johnson, who helps maintain the crumbling old locks at the prison. In the early 1990s, he had just opened an old lock in cell block 4 when he says a force gripped him so tightly that he was unable to move. He described a negative, horrible energy that exploded out of the cell, while tormented faces appeared on the cell walls, and that one form in particular beckoned to him. Although executions were not carried out at Eastern State, the prison was home to its fair share of deaths. At least, 2 guards were killed over the years, as were many inmates, with their spirits still very much present. In first place, we have the Hotel Monte Vista in Flagstaff, Arizona. So with tourism on the rise in the 1920s, residents of Flagstaff decided that building a hotel was the crucial, next step in aiding the city's growth as one of northern Arizona's premier destinations. Fundraising began in early 1926, and by New Year's Day on 1927, the hotel was finally open, offering 73 guest rooms under the name Community Motel, which would later be changed to the Monte Vista, a name chosen by a 12-year-old contest winner. This hotel hosted one of the few hidden speakeasies in Flagstaff during Prohibition, which was, a late-night establishment fed by secret tunnels that were built by railroad workers and ran for miles below the downtown core. Over the years, it has adopted quite a few spirits, and I'd like to elaborate on 3 of them. Out of the many rooms in this historic hotel where the spirits of the past like to make their presence known, let's start with room 220, where an unusual one-time resident, known as the Meat Man, is still causing a stir to this day. This long-term boarder, who spent his days at the Monte Vista back in the early 1980s, had a somewhat unusual habit, hanging raw meat from a chandelier. No one has any clue why he did this, but definitely makes him memorable. One day, the poor schmuck was found dead in his room. Nothing suspicious otherwise, and what has happened in that room since that day is why he made this list. On one such occasion, not long after the meat man had passed, a maintenance worker for the hotel was up in room 220 making a few repairs. When he left, he turned off the lights and locked the door, but when he returned shortly after, he found that chaos had erupted in his absence. The television was fully on, playing at full volume, and even more distressing, the linens on the bed had been violently removed, ripped up, and scattered across the room as if in a fit of anger. The maintenance worker in question steered clear of room 220 from then on, but even today, guests in the room have reported the television acting on its own accord, though it, has long since been replaced, as well as the cold touch of a man's hands. Ooh. Next up, the rocking chair of room 305. So the most common report, which has been well documented, is of an elderly woman in the rocking chair by the window. Guests have long told the tale of the chair moving by itself, knocking against the closet, and some have even seen the old woman herself, gazing longingly out the window. While the woman's name is not known, old stories from the hotel tell of a long-term resident who would, sit by the window, day in and day out, looking out into the world, perhaps waiting patiently for someone to return. Finally, I feel like I'd be cursed if I left out the ladies of room 306. In the early 1940s, 2 women of the night were working their shift, only to be picked up by a man who was staying in, room 306 of the Monte Vista Hotel, and looking for some company for the night. The two women returned to his room, and that night were, brutally ended and dumped out of the third-floor window to the street below. What happened to these women was horrendous, and it seems that they agree, seeing as their spirits are still haunting this room, lashing out at anyone who dares to stay there. In the decades since, guests have reported the uneasy feeling of being watched, as well as difficulty sleeping. Men in particular tend to be affected, with some claiming that ghostly hands have been placed over their mouths or throats while they sleep.
Number 5. St. Mary the Virgin Church, Clop Hill, England. I gotta say, that sounds like it's a fake place, like where Sir Topham Hatt lives. Well, not only is it real, but it's home to a bone-chilling haunted church, St. Mary the Virgin Church. Now, St. Mary was built in 1350 outside the main settlement of totally real place Clop Hill. Traditionally, churches are built facing the east. I didn't know that. It's so it can align with the sun rising, which in Christianity is associated with heaven and the Messiah. Churches have their altars facing east, so you pray in that holy direction. Well, St. Mary's just had to be a little different, and this church is facing the west, facing away from God. And it's why some people believe the church is hosted to evil spirits, as facing west means they've shunned God and opened their doors to the devil. Paranormal investigators have strongly suspected the church as being host to satanic rituals. As the church fell into disuse, it became a popular spot for vandals, and if you believe the legends, black magic. In 1963, a local couple saw two people wandering around holding a human skull, which definitely I think would cause you to look twice. The people told the couple that they had found the skull in St. Mary's, where it had been jammed into a wall. When the couple went to investigate, they found on the floor a breastbone, pelvis, and leg bones, all laid out in a pattern used for black mass. Pretty spooky. Scattered cockerel feathers and tracings of two crosses filled in red were found inside the church as well. And as if that wasn't slightly unnerving enough, they also found that 6 graves of women in particular had been tampered with as well. All signs seem to be pointing towards some dark rituals happening at St. Mary's Church. Common sightings at the St. Mary's Church range from smaller scale things like strange screeching during the night or hearing the bell going off despite being long abandoned, and the more threatening reports seeing tall, dark figures wandering the ruins of the church, perhaps getting themselves ready for another ritual, or perhaps they've been contacted by a ritual and are arriving. Only thing I know is I won't be checking out the midnight mass there anytime soon. And if you're interested in way more scary stories of all manners, cryptids, conspiracies, churches, hauntings, aliens, we've got a little bit of everything at Top 5 Scary. So click on through, find something to get cozy with, and subscribe, and make sure you hit that bell so you catch all of our videos as they drop. But do all that stuff at the end of this one, okay? Because we got way more haunted churches for you coming right up. Number 4. Our next entry on the list today is going to be the Aquia Episcopal Church. And if you haven't said that, try saying that 10 times fast. I dare you. Located in picturesque Stafford, Virginia. The church has 200 years of history to it, which means it's also got approximately 200 years worth of ghost stories to study. When the church was first built way back when in the 18th century, it was stained by an unfortunate tragedy. You see, the surrounding areas were exhausted by war and the lack of resources, food, and money, and as such, brigands would take to the dark country roads to attack innocents during the night for whatever they had on them. Well, one young woman was hiding from a gang of highwaymen and marauders and sought out the church as a safe haven. Unfortunately, the bandits eventually caught up with her and she met an untimely end. Now, these men were never caught for their crime, and her body was not found for hundreds of years, left there to rot and decompose. And many believe that because of this, her spirit is tied to the church. And there have been several reports of hauntings ever since the discovery of those accursed bones. Visitors mention hearing footsteps frantically scattered around at night. These footsteps break into a run, but if you go searching, you'll never be able to find anyone attached to them. Voices can be heard in the room where she was attacked, some saying it sounds like a call for help or a painful scream of a struggle. Some go so far as to say they saw a transparent apparition of the woman in the church's windows or on the balcony. One story comes to us from a custodian who worked the graveyard shift there in the 1990s, claiming that he saw a ghostly woman's face floating above the graces, and says that he saw her smiling at him through the balcony windows before she vanished. One last one on this church. In the 1990s, to celebrate the bicentennial anniversary, the church sent out an invitation to a group of Civil War reenactors to fight a mock battle on its ground. During the night, one of the reenactors was complaining that there was a red and orange light that was flickering the entire night during the church that prevented him from sleeping. The man explained this to the father of the church, and the father explained back that there was no electricity in the vestry, and that the light must have been been the spirit confused by why the Civil War had started up again. Imagine you're a ghost, you're already out of time, and then you look outside and you see guys from your time. My little ghostly sense of the world would be so thrown off. I would have to buy a new ghost calendar. Number 3. Monastir Nagayal Duff. Or Abbey of the Black Hag if you don't got all that time. Wow, you see that? You see what that church is called in that little chyron below me right now? I'm just supposed to pronounce that with like my lips? Okay, it's also called the Abbey of the Black Hag, and that's what we're going with. We're not calling it that other thing. I'm not doing that. Black Abbey of the Hag, only name this church has ever gone by, and it was built in 1298. And it was one of the well-known medieval convents in Old Ireland. The remains of the abbey still stand today in a secluded valley, making it already mysterious and supernatural place just that much more supernatural and overgrown and spooky. I mean, the place is called the Abbey of the Black Hag. You don't name a place that unless it's extremely haunted or if there's like a cool boss fight or something there. Sounds like it's straight out of Dishonored. It's believed that the last abbess, horrible word by the way, in charge of the abbey practiced witchcraft, and in the scary way, okay? She brought death, misfortune to the surrounding areas. Pope Martin V condemned the abbey, not being down for witches at all. The accused witch left to live out in the damp, deserted abbey by herself, which she probably loved because it sounds scary. Over time, her skin blackened, her hair furled, and her soul twisted, leading to the place being renamed the Abbey of the Black Hag. And if you can believe it, there's actually more to this one. The Count and Countess of Desmond once called the abbey home when attempting to flee their attackers, where the Countess was fatally struck by an arrow and buried by her husband. But it wouldn't be the end of the Countess, because sightings of a ghostly figure around the ruins of the abbey were common, meaning someone eventually went to dig up that grave, finding worn out finger bones, meaning she was still alive when she was buried. It's said now that a woman's panicked shrieking can be heard in the early hours around the abbey. Number 2. The Borley Rectory. The Borley Rectory is an old London estate that has the unique distinction of being considered the most haunted building in the United Kingdom. No big deal, or anything. Almost immediately after its construction, stories of hauntings started to creep out. One of the first local legends says that in the 12th century, a priest and a nun had a naughty little affair, and when they were discovered, the nun was bricked up and left to rot in the nearby church. Since then, they say that her spirit roams the rectory. In 1900, 4 daughters of the then estate owner all said that they saw a nun wandering around the estate late at night. They tried to talk to her, but got no response back, just a scary ghost stare. The family claimed they'd see this nun around the property, and on one occasion they thought they saw the spectral apparition of a horse-drawn carriage with a headless rider. Some real Sleepy Hollow stuff. From there on, there was all these reports of bizarre sounds or strange shadows creeping out the corner of your eye. In 1927, the estate changed hands, as the original family owning the estate had all passed on, and a new family, the Smiths, had moved in. Shortly after, they discovered a human skull in the cupboard in a brown bag. Which is not a great housewarming gift, to be honest. They reported poltergeist behavior, unexplained footsteps, lights flicking around them, and the same sightings of headless specters. Now, they only lasted 2 years, not being down for any of the hauntings or skulls in cupboards, any of that business. And the next family, the Foysters, didn't have much better luck. They had objects flying around their home, and on one occasion claimed their daughter was attacked by something truly horrible. They moved out as well. And the last owner of the rectory would be Captain Gregson, who accidentally lit the estate ablaze while unpacking, although insurance claims they think the fire was started intentionally, perhaps in a desperate attempt to cast away whatever evil has been trapped in the Borley Rectory for so long, or perhaps he unintentionally unleashed it out into the world. Time will tell. At number 1, Mortimer Abbey. Mortimer Abbey is a monastery in the forest of Lyons, France. A real old church built in 1134 on marshland, near the stagnant water of the drainage lake. The monks dug it out to try and dry the marshy land around the Fulbrock stream, which was called the Dead Pond. In French, Mortemont, which is where the name comes from. You can kind of hear it there. Mortimer, you know. Perhaps it's this history of being built on a dead pond is why Mortimer Abbey was doomed to be haunted. Now, the abbey flourished for centuries, but over time started to become claimed by the passage of time, and it fell into decline and disrepair. In the 17th century, there was an attempt to try and rebuild the abbey and recapture its former old glory, but the decline was already pretty present and had set in by that point, and by the time of the French Revolution, only 5 monks still remained in the abbey. Eventually, the abbey would collapse entirely and go private, and in 1863, the abbey would find itself in the hands of a rich Parisian family, the Delarues. Mr. Delarue moved his wife and his sons into the abbey, but soon discovered they weren't the only tenants. While walking the lawns, the young people of the house saw a light from the library. As if by an invisible hand, these hatches unfastened, their handles turned, and the windows and doors all opened. The paintings on the inside of the abbey turned themselves around and steps thundered out into the halls, and nobody moved out immediately after. I would have started looking for new real estate right then and there. But one night the young Delarue, Charles, had his fiancée over to come see the estate that would become her new home in marriage. She was offered the guest room, but found herself terrified during the night when she couldn't sleep because she was too busy being tormented by mysterious sounds and objects around the room that were hurling themselves around, being possessed by something. Having had, quite frankly, enough, like I think any of us might have, the young suitor announced she would never live in this house, called off the entire marriage, and hurried back to Paris tout de suite, where there were plenty of handsome young men asking her hand in marriage who didn't live in old haunted estates, okay? That's the message to take away from this. Get the love you deserve, and the love you deserve is not in a haunted house.
Number 5, Gettysburg College. Gettysburg College, which is a 4-year undergraduate liberal arts institution, is well known for its strong academics as well as its reputation of having one of the most haunted campuses in America. The college was founded in 1832, prior to the Civil War, and boasts numerous ghostly legends. John, a student who graduated in 2004, has spoken out about an encounter he had in 2003 when he was working as a secretary in Penn Hall, saying that he took the elevator, and when it opened, there was a full working Civil War hospital in the basement, with lights, people walking around working, and soldiers. All he was able to do was stare as the doors closed, and when they opened the next time, it was a regular basement. So Penn Hall, being the oldest building on campus, was built in, 1832, and actually served as a hospital for wounded soldiers as well as a morgue during the 1863 Battle of Gettysburg. The hospital is described as having been extremely gruesome, and soldiers were often fully conscious during their ghastly operations. According to a story found in Mark V. Nesbitt's Ghosts of Gettysburg, John is not the only one to have witnessed this scene. 2 campus administrators in the 1980s took the elevator down to the basement and were unexpectedly met with the views of gruesomely injured patients. I'll pass in that basement, mostly because I've always been creeped out by them, but this isn't the only haunted building on this campus. Stevens Hall, which was built in 1911, was originally used as a prep school for girls who would later enter the college, and is allegedly the most haunted dormitory on campus. One year, hockey player Amanda Schlager was the only person living in Stevens Hall before the semester started, and would often hear footsteps down the hall and above her, but when she looked around the next day, there was no one else in the dorm. So while you might be able to write off that instance as a simple prank, that's not the only ghostly take from that building. This building is famous for being haunted by a ghost named the Blue Boy. The legend claims that one freezing winter night, a few girls snuck an orphan into their room to help him stay warm. When a house mother unexpectedly came in, they shoved him onto the 3rd-story window ledge to hide him. But when they went back to let him in, he was nowhere to be seen. It was never clear what happened to him, but the apparition of his blue face pressed against the window, as well as strange noises throughout the dorm, have horrified residents ever since. And finally, there's been some one-off instances of spooky encounters in Huber Hall as well. Other students have described ghostly encounters in their first-year dormitories. One woke up one night to a pressure on her chest and heard someone dragging across the floor. She closed her eyes, and when she opened them, every single item on her and her roommate's desks had been thrown onto the floor. Years later, someone who lived in that exact same room experienced a night where his alarm clock reset itself during the night and was blaring the alarm even after the student pulled it out of the wall. I can handle a decent amount of ghost behavior, but I like my sleep too much for that. My first roommate can vouch for the fact that I will growl at anyone who wakes me up. From experience. Number 4, R.H. King Academy. So this academy, also known as RHKA or King, is formerly also known as Scarborough High School. Scarborough Collegiate Institute and R.H. King Collegiate Institute is a secondary school located in Scarborough, Toronto, Ontario, as part of the Toronto District School Board. This school was established in 1922 and then became a collegiate in 1930, renamed in 1954 and again in 1989, so it's had a bit of a complex. Fun fact, it was the first secondary school built in Scarborough, and boy oh boy is it home to some spirits. To my knowledge, ghosties have been observed in many areas in the school, and I think I'll start with one of the most common ghost locations, the school library. So a former vice principal recalled seeing something move through the book stacks when he was all alone in the library after school and swore to never be alone in that library ever again. Other teachers have discussed seeing weird shapes out of the corners of their eyes, expecting a rogue student. But no one was there. At the main entrance to the library, there are scanners that go off to count the number of people going in and coming out, and they tend to go off at least once a day with no rhyme or reason. Keeping with the book theme, let's move on to the English department book room. It used to be the second floor stands for Gym 3, a place where students could watch various sporting events, but was repurposed to fit the changing needs of the school. My old high school got rid of its library to keep up with changing needs, so it's healing my soul a little bit knowing not all schools are like that. Several years ago, a former teacher was alone in the building, and as she was leaving the book room, she heard the sound of a ball bouncing coming from Gym 3. But when she went to investigate the noises, she found the gym vacant and engulfed in darkness, and didn't hear any sounds that could have been anyone running away really quickly to not get in trouble. In the final book-related room before we move on to other places, the Heritage Room located on the D floor is suspected to be home to some residents. When the school was first built, the Heritage Room served as the library, but when the new library on B floor opened in 1975, the room was left vacant. Some students report a feeling of being watched when they enter the room alone, while others report smelling a woman's perfume in one specific spot of the room and not finding the smell again once they walk away. Many even report feeling poked or tapped on their backs and not being able to find the cause. One theory is that an old librarian spirit still lies in that room today, watching over the students, which makes sense and is kind of sweet. The other has to do with the staircase behind the room, where allegedly a caretaker met an early end. Whether he took his own life or it was a freak accident depends on who you ask. Speaking of spooky hallways, which are a good ghost hiding place, an old boiler room hallway on B floor used to lead to a beautiful ornate auditorium that was torn down to make room for a parking lot. Yeah, it hurt my theatrical soul to say that. While students often use the hallway to exit the school during the day, on multiple occasions, the night shift security has been alerted by motion sensors going off. Upon searching the hallway, they see an open door and hear rattling, but they don't find anybody. Former students have recalled an uncanny feeling while walking down that hallway, and even mentioned hearing footsteps behind them. And when they turn around, no one's there. To my knowledge, the most frequent area that ghosts like to hang out in the school is the A floor War Memorial, which honors students of R.H. King who fought in the Second World War. The most notable encounter happened to a janitor working the 12 to 8 shift in the 90s. At around 4 a.m., as he was walking down that hall, the lights turned off, and when he sat on the ground, he felt someone touch his left shoulder. Suspecting it was another caretaker, he asked them to stop, and immediately the lights came back on. And what do you know? There was no one else around. Traveling over to the C-floor science rooms, another former member of the late-night custodial staff was using a chair to hold open the glass door that led to the stairwell to make her job easier. And after a few minutes, she heard the door close and noticed that the chair had been moved. She didn't think much of it, thinking the chair had just, moved from gravity, so she propped open the door again using the chair and returned to her work. And just a minute later, she heard the door slam again and noticed that the chair had been moved further away from the door, so it wasn't gravity this time. Starting to get more suspicious, she put the chair back in front of the door and again returned to work. But only a few minutes later, she heard a giant crash and saw that the chair had been flung across the hallway and the door was closed. Ah, poltergeists, those mischievous buggers. Gotta love them. Number 3, New York University. Knowing now that so many old universities are extremely haunted, I'm kinda glad I went to a fairly new place for my education, since I'm kinda susceptible to ghosts and whatnot. Kicking this school off with the most famous haunted building, Brittany Residence Hall. Allegedly, when Brittany used to be a hotel, a student named Molly died in the elevator and continues to haunt the space, and specifically her elevator. A former student named Claire was the unfortunate recipient of Molly's wrath when attempting to return home very late one night. She entered the cursed elevator, and when it got to the 8th floor, the elevator shook and dropped, and stopped on the 5th floor. No one had called the elevator, so it stayed there for a minute, the doors opened, closed, and then it went down to the 2nd floor like nothing had happened. And she's not alone in her tale. I found many similar tales across the internet today, and elevator technicians don't have any kind of practical reasoning for the elevator's wrongdoings. Over in Gramercy Green Residence Hall, a student named Hillary woke up one night in her dorm to the sight of a pale figure next to her bed, and originally assumed it was her roommate rummaging about, until she saw her roommate sleeping in her own bed out of the corner of her eye, and the spirit was still lingering. Thankfully, she didn't do anything to anger the spirit, but simply turned her back towards the ghost, put her comforter over her head, and managed to go back to sleep. Founders Residence Hall is home to strange noises, creaks, doors opening on their own, and lights that turn off and on, but also change settings on their own. It sounds like the classrooms may be safe for this university, but maybe stay off campus and not in residence to be certain. Number 2. Transylvania University. It's a private university in Lexington, Kentucky that was founded in 1780 and was the first university in the state. Transylvania's name, meaning across the woods in Latin, stems from the university's founding in the heavily forested region of Western Virginia known as the Transylvania Colony, which existed briefly between 1775 and 76 in south and western Kentucky. I promise I'm not about to tell another vampire or Dracula story, I swear. Granted, if y'all would eventually like me to talk, ad nauseum about vampires, let me know in the comments because that's something I feel like I could chat about for hours. So the oldest university west of the Allegheny Mountains, TU is home to the tomb of Constantine Rafinesque, a terribly unpopular botany professor who also served as a French and Italian tutor, and had quite the affair with the college president's wife before being banished. Angry and bitter, legend has it that he cast a spell on the university as he left town and died of yellow fever, and now his ghost still haunts its grounds. Students have reported seeing the ghost of a student who allegedly took their own life, and a male who would stand at the foot of their bed and vanish before their eyes. That's not exactly anything I want to see when I'm trying to sleep. Just me. Number 1. Marblehead Schools in Hellmouth. Okay, technically nowadays the town goes by Marblehead, but that name had me doing a double take. With my love of Buffy, I've been led to believe my entire life that a major Hellmouth was in Sunnydale, California, not Massachusetts. The definition of a Hellmouth is a property representing the entrance of Hades. So the middle school girls' locker room in this school is rumored to be haunted by a man that passed away in a motorcycle accident. Reports indicate that the high school was built on an ancient burial ground, and eyewitnesses can attest they have seen poltergeists, apparitions, orbs, a gray lady, and the mystique of not being wanted roams across the hallways. Maintenance records claim that the elevators in the schools don't work properly, and the building's fire alarms randomly go off. There are also reports of UFO sightings in Marblehead's middle school, but they've been mostly scrubbed from the internet. I swear I tried to find them.
Number 5. The Lexington. If you're a Texas native, then you probably don't need much introduction to the USS Lexington. Formerly known as the Blue Ghost, the decommissioned aircraft carrier now stands as a museum, and it's thought by some to hold a lot more than some old war relics and stories. It might just contain some old souls who've never quite left its service. The museum's director of operations, Charles Russell, claims that the museum receives hundreds upon hundreds of reports of supernatural and inexplicable activity and sightings every single year. Most famous among them is a benevolent ghost dressed in a sailor's uniform who aids guests in finding their way around the ship before vanishing back into the air. He describes one particularly vivid encounter with a spirit inhabiting his office where, after losing 6 pens over the course of a week, he found all of them arranged perfectly, laying side by side in front of his keyboard. He reassures visitors that the spirits who live aboard the Lexington are playful, not frightful. They're more like Casper in that regard, I guess. Other stories tell sightings and reports of hearing lost souls running for cover after a torpedo attack, describing running sounds and other strange noises in the hangar bay. The paranormal tour guide aboard the Lexington describes it as, this was their home and they don't want to go anywhere else. I kind of get it, I'd want to live on an aircraft carrier. That seems pretty cool. I'd try to swing that as long as I could. Like most purportedly haunted locations, if finding something spooky in the cold steel of the Lexington truly interests you, the museum offers a paranormal investigation tour where guests can spend the night with their own equipment in the hopes of finding someone to trip up your EVP meter. And if that ain't enough for you and you're looking for something spooky from the confines of your own home, well, we can hook you up with that real easy. Click through on Top 5 Scary because we've got loads of videos about haunted spots, ghosts, ghouls, goblins, aliens, cryptids, conspiracies, and just about anything freaky you can think up. Stay subscribed, stay scared, but, stay watching this video as well, okay? We worked hard. Number 4. Lara Fe. Lara Fe up in Houston looks unassuming at first. Looks like a pretty typical dive bar experience. Looks nice though, I definitely would like to go. But if you believe the rumors, allegedly this is one of the most haunted buildings in the entire state. The bar also is one of the oldest buildings in Texas as well, having been initially built sometime in the early 1800s. It's seen life as quite a few things: a pharmacy, an apothecary, a bakery, and eventually Lara Fe. So it's not too surprising that in all of its years of service, picked up a few guests who aren't ready to pay the bill and leave just yet. Many regular customers have a ghost story to tell you, as well as the bartenders. Many report strange noises, a glass breaking mysteriously, some even seeing lipstick stains on a glass they're drinking from appear out of nowhere. Do ghosts have germs? Is it safe to share a drink with a ghost? I don't know if I would do that unless we got to know each other a bit first, and then hey, anything can happen. I'm open. The bar is said to be haunted by a former tender named Carl, Carl, who frequent guests claim they can hear shouting out for last call still years after passing the bar. Some claim they can see Carl's silhouette through his second-floor window. Another ghost said to haunt the premises is the Lady in White, who supposedly pushed attractive women down the stairs. Hardly a way to get them to like you, let me tell you from experience. She's thought to be the ghost of a woman who ran a cat house near the Carafe. Believers say that they see orbs and mist in photos and feel cold spots all over. I guess you could say they serve up more than one kind of spirits. I'll see myself out. I'm sorry, that's not my best work. If you're ever in Houston and looking for a bit of spooky ambiance, definitely check out the Carafe and all of its otherworldly guests. Just make sure to tip your ghost about 15%. Number 3, the Driscoll Hotel. The Driscoll Hotel is another shining spot in the state, said to be a hotbed of paranormal activity. Lone Star State, Lone Scare State, more like. With how many ghosts are said to live in this place, it's hard to imagine that you'd even be able to get a free room. One of the more notable ones is the owner, the cowboy Jesse Driscoll himself, who built the place originally. Shortly after the hotel's construction, it's said that Jesse came under very hard times. So, desperate for money, Jesse gambled away the deed to the hotel in a game of cards, and was forever swallowed by this guilt, losing his cherished prize. It's said his spirit still resides in this hotel, in the room looking out at 6th Street and Brazos. A consultant once reported looking out of the window in this room and seeing a man dressed in old western attire, puffing a cigar, asking, "Hey fella, what are you doing in my room?" When he flicked the lights on and off to make sure he wasn't seeing what he thought he'd seen, the varmint disappeared, leaving behind only a trail of smoke. Another notable ghost guests like to talk about is the Bride, the ghost of a distraught woman who ended her life in the early 1990s after her wedding was called off, as she blew through all her money in a desperate coping attempt. I get it. Guests say that they see her ghost towing bags up and down the halls of the hotel, still running mad. Now I'll leave you with one last good spooky story out of the Driscoll. There was actually so many for this one. Definitely read up on it at home or visit if you're nearby. It seems like there's a lot going on. There's a painting on the 5th floor. It's a painting of a little girl holding a bouquet of flowers in one hand and a letter in the other. Paranormal enthusiasts claim that this painting is the daughter of a US senator who passed away in a freak accident at the hotel, and her spirit lingers on in the canvas. Guests claim that they can feel something tugging at their coats or legs when they walk on by. Oof, it's a little too interactive for me for an art experience. Number 2, the Oakwood Cemetery. I gotta say, a cemetery is a pretty classical location for something haunted to be happening. I think we all sort of suspect most cemeteries are haunted as is. I mean, a couple thousand dead bodies all buried underneath the same plot makes my hair stand on end. I said I was gonna try not to do a southern drawl, but I swear it's coming on naturally. I'm sorry. Oakwood Cemetery in particular is well known as a haunted spot to those who believe. It was established sometime in the 1850s, though it's thought that earlier settlers were laid to rest there too. With 23,000 souls resting there, it's no surprise that there is a litany of spooky stories amongst the tombstones. Take a listen to some of the more notable ones I dug up for you. One in particular that gets retold is that of Eula Phillips, a young woman who was struck fatally with an axe on Christmas Eve. Not that there's ever a good day for that, but that's a pretty bad one. Her husband was found guilty, only to be exonerated later when it turned out that there was a series of victims all around the same area matching her profile. 8 others who all fell victim to this is unbelievable that any newspaper ever printed this name, the Servant Girl Annihilator. I cannot believe they named him that. I've actually featured him in a video before. I can't quite remember the title of it, but click through on every single top 5 scary video until you find it. There are some theorists who suspect the Servant Girl Annihilator and the infamous Jack the Ripper are one and the same, and that guy just could not get enough traveling from country to country. Some local residents claim that Eula's ghost roams the cemetery, lost, afraid, and panicked, unable to come to terms with the vile means of her death. Another very notable ghost is that of Susanna Dickinson. When Lopez de Santa Anna attacked the Alamo, Susanna and her kin were brought into the garrison. The dust cleared and the battle was over, and Susanna met with Santa Anna, where he offered to take her and her children back to Mexico, but she declined, knowing it might even cost her her life. Surprised, Santa Anna spared her, and her account of the Alamo was crucial to understanding and remembering what happened there. Susanna was buried at a plot in Oakwood, and visitors say she constantly appears to strangers, telling her stories all these years on, still remembering the Alamo. And number 1, Yorktown Memorial Hospital. About 80 miles southeast of San Antonio is Yorktown. A small community with a population that barely exceeds a couple thousand. Probably a good reason for that, because if the legends are to be believed, the hauntings at the Yorktown Memorial Hospital might be keeping people away. The hospital was built in 1951, where it operated for a bit, and was eventually took over by the Felician Sisters of the Roman Catholic Church, who kept the place running until late 1986 when it was abandoned. Where it still sits today, almost as if nothing's happened. It looks like everybody just packed up and left. It's said that over 2,000 people call Yorktown their final resting spot, with 500 of those all occurring during the small tenure of the nuns running the hospital. These days, of course, the hospital's sickly lime green walls don't really see a lot of patients. Mostly just ghost hunters and seekers of the paranormal looking for something lurking left behind. And if the stories are true, this place is filled with restless ghosts. Explorers report everything from disembodied voices to sounds of wheelchairs creaking, mysterious flashes of lights, orbs, mists, cold chills, you know, the usual who's who greatest hits of haunted spots. Now, you don't even need to be told this place is haunted to worry about it. I mean, just look at it. The place looks like it's straight out of Silent Hill, down to the rusted pipes and leaky hallways, but don't fret, no, there are ghosts. One in particular is that of a late surgeon, one Leon Norierski. He was infamous around the hospital for his sloppy handiwork, and was said to have lost a number of patients in his time, and his spirit as such has been cursed to wander the facilities endlessly. Keeps writing terrifying messages on the wall, but no one can read them because he's a doctor. That's not my best work. I'm really sorry. Some of these should have stayed on the writing board. Another infamous ghost is that of Sally, a young girl who's said to still live in the hospital's halls, heard happily playing, jovially dancing around, and even asking explorers to read her favorite story when she encounters them. I hope someone takes her up on that. Not me though, nothing personal. I just have like a policy about not reading stories to ghosts.
Number 1, the Stanley Hotel. Made famous as the hotel inspiring Stephen King's The Shining, the Stanley Hotel holds a dark and eerie past, dating back to its year of construction, 1909. The Stanley Hotel was originally built by Freeland Oscar Stanley as a tuberculosis treatment center. As it was high up in the mountains, he had found that the air had significantly helped his symptoms of the sickness. He wished to help other people as well. He opened the hotel as a treatment center in 1909 and created over 100 rooms on the bottom 3 floors, leaving the 4th floor as a single-family living space. The first tragedy struck the Stanley Hotel in the form of a gas explosion. When the hotel first opened, it was one of the only places to have fully modernized electricity running through the entire building. Due to the property being so isolated, they had to install an auxiliary gas lighting, powered by burning gases as fuel. But in 1911, the system malfunctioned and there was an explosion. Parts of the building were wrecked. 8 people were injured, one of them being a maid who was propelled down the main stairs from the infamous room 217. But I'll get into that in just a minute. The grand staircase that the maid was hurled down is the cause for far more mysteries surrounding the hotel. Many people claim to have seen people standing on the staircase, girls in white dresses, or past patients walking up and down the stairs. On the Stanley Hotel ghost tour, many people have been lucky enough, or unlucky enough depending on who you are, to capture a blurry photograph of the girl in the white dress. A girl that they do not recall seeing when the photo was taken. The 4th floor of the Stanley Hotel was a single-room attic space when the hotel was originally constructed, but upon increased demand, they created more rooms on the 4th floor, which apparently created more space for the paranormal to lurk. Room 401 is said to have a closet that opens and closes itself. Room 407 has an invisible presence that sits on the bed while guests are sleeping. And in room 428, you might be visited by the ghost of a cowboy. Throughout the entirety of the 4th floor, you can hear children laughing and giggling below, and most strangely, above you. Seeing as the 4th floor is the highest level, it's obvious that hearing children run above you would be worrying, ghost or not. Room 217 is the holder of the most well-known stories behind the Stanley Hotel, and is the inspiration for the creation of The Shining. In 1974, Stephen King stayed at the Stanley Hotel in room 217, and during his stay he experienced a very unnerving nightmare. And if a nightmare is able to unnerve Stephen King, it's certain that it was something peculiar. This nightmare inspired him to write The Shining. The gas explosion of 1911 was sparked in room 217, started by the maid, who fell down the stairs, who lit a torch while the gas pipes were overflowing. People claim that the maid can still be heard walking through the room, talking and laughing to herself, yet still providing excellent service as she continues to clean the room and make the bed at random times. Number 2, the Hotel Chelsea. Located in New York City, Hotel Chelsea has gained extreme popularity in the paranormal community due to the myriad of strange occurrences that people have witnessed. Now abandoned, the once lively hotel finds itself nearly empty, filled only with spirits. Opened in 1884, the Chelsea was designed as a co-op where people could live together as a community and find comfort in those living around them. The founder, Philip Hubert, reserved rooms for the people who built the hotel: electricians, plumbers, interior designers, and construction workers. They all got a place to live at the Chelsea. At the time it was built, the 12-story building was the tallest building in New York. Sadly, in 1905, Philip Hubert went bankrupt, and the dream that he had created began to crumble before his eyes. The Chelsea was converted into a hotel and was frequently visited by many high-status guests or permanent residents. The Chelsea became an artist colony, with some of the artists trading paintings for rent money. Children of wealthy parents found solace in the welcoming community, and for just a moment, it seemed as though Hubert's vision continued to prosper. People would come from all over the world, paying for a room, only to take in the art in the lobby. The hotel has many ghosts, though only a few have multiple substantiated sightings. Mary has the most sightings from guests. As a survivor of the Titanic, Mary arrived at the hotel very depressed and distraught. Unable to move on from the trauma she had faced, she soon took her own life in her fifth-floor apartment. Mary's ghost now spends most of her time under the arch that was the original entryway, staring at herself in the mirror and becoming frustrated at the living who dare to disturb her. Nadia was a young woman who threw herself out of a window at the hotel after removing her own hand. The ghost of Nadia is now seen with a severed hand, trying to find her way back into the hotel, walking in aimless circles and unable to re-enter. The Hotel Chelsea was officially closed in 2011 due to the damaged state of the very old building. Many are still attempting to restore the Chelsea to its original glory, but the spirits of past residents don't provide the most help. Number 3, the Amana Holiday Inn. In 1980, on Friday, September 10th, Roger and Rose arrived at the Amana Holiday Inn in Iowa. When they first arrived, they planned to only stay one night, but after a terrifying turn of events, they had a much more permanent stay than they'd originally anticipated. On Saturday morning, the hotel manager, Dean, grew concerned by the couple's delay in checking out. Dean went to the couple's room and opened the locked door, a heart-stopping scene. The room trashed, covered in a red, sticky substance, and the couple laid in bed, unmoving. Dean called the police, who showed up immediately. The police confirmed Dean's worst fears. The couple was no longer alive. Police knew that they had been made victim to a brutal attack, but many questions still remained. The hotel room had no signs of forced entry, no missing items or ransacked clothes. The most perplexing part of this case was the bar of soap, spelling this. There were small pieces of soap next to the bed, as though the killer was sitting and doing a project. The inn was at full capacity that night, and no staff members saw anyone exit or enter the locked room of Roger and Rose. Staff say they didn't even see anyone walk in that direction. No noise disturbances were heard either. It was as if the killer just disappeared into thin air. Hundreds of people were interrogated or interviewed, but no one had ever been able to provide any useful information regarding the truth of what happened that night. The case went cold, and many people began to create conspiracies and speculations as to who the killer could have been, and reasoned that the most probable answer was the killer being a ghost. Number 4, Hotel Cecil. Found in the sunny state of California, Hotel Cecil is an LA hotspot of mysterious circumstances. Built in 1924, the Cecil was a destination for businessmen and high-class clientele. But following the Great Depression, it became a low-cost location for a few not quite legal businesses, and even later became the treasured home of spirits, unanswered questions, strange occurrences, and even killers. The Cecil's connection to high volumes of death and disappearances began shortly after it was opened. In the 1930s alone, the Cecil had at least 6 cases of guests taking their own lives. In 1962, a man walking by the hotel was struck by a woman who had jumped out of her window, ending both of their lives almost instantly. By this point, the number of dark occurrences had climbed so high and so quickly that the hotel was dubbed the most haunted hotel in Los Angeles. In the mid-1980s, Richard Ramirez, also referred to as the Night Stalker, stayed in the Cecil Hotel during a large part of his spree, claiming the lives of many in the area during his stay. Another killer from Australia also took up residence in the hotel, apparently due to hearing that Ramirez had once stayed there. Though the hotel was home to prolific killers, there are many deaths that have remained unsolved tragedies. In the mid to late 20th century, multiple guests were found in their rooms in upsetting states and unresponsive. Others were found in the same state outside the hotel. Having no cameras in the hotel at the time, people were hesitant to believe that these acts were committed by something of a different realm. But after security footage from Elisa Lam's last moments was released, people began to credit the paranormal for some of the past unsolved tragedies. Elisa Lam was a young Canadian student who stayed at the Cecil in 2013. In her last moments, there is a video footage of her in an elevator, frantically hiding and speaking to empty spaces, obviously terrified. Elisa's body was found in the water tank on top of the building 3 weeks after she had gone missing. Authorities ruled her death as accidental, but many believe that something much more sinister was the cause, citing the similarities between her tragic story and others from the past. In 2023, the hotel is now being renovated as an attempt to completely rebrand itself. But I'm not so sure the spirits left living there are going to be any more welcoming to the next generation of guests that stays in the hotel. Number 5, Langham, London. Built in 1865 with over 500 rooms, the Langham is an unsurprising host of paranormal activity. The strange activity was first brought to attention in 1965, exactly 100 years after its founding, by several guests who all claimed to see the same 5 ghosts on multiple different occasions. The most cited ghost was described as a German man of high social class wearing fine clothes. Guests say he often floats through walls and paintings, from room to room, lowering the temperature with merely his presence. Room 333 is considered the most haunted room in the hotel, believed to be the host of an extremely outgoing yet silent ghost. A reporter staying there with his colleagues was woken up in the dead of night to a bright, glowing light descending towards him. Upon gazing at it further, he was able to make out a Victorian woman, missing her legs and reaching her arms out to him. The reporter ran from his room to get his colleagues, who returned to the room and saw the fading image of the ghost.
In 5th place, we have Castle in Romania. Ah yes, my crush on vampires and heavy bias is coming into play. Can you blame me? I dress like this. I know I've mentioned it before, but my big brother is literally like a vampire king. Long story, but it's true. And that sort of stuff just imprints on a girl. And if Castle doesn't ring any bells, try this on for size. Dracula's castle. Yeah, I totally have the biggest crush on the Dracula Universal Studios. Respectively speaking, of course. Cripes. Where was I? Right. Bran Castle is linked to the historical character who inspired author Bram Stoker, that being Vlad III Dracula, otherwise known as Vlad the Impaler. He is often considered one of the most important rulers in Wallachian history and a national hero of Romania. Now, while he wasn't fond of draining life force like the legend he went on to inspire, his preference for impaling his enemies on stakes in the ground and leaving them to die earned him the name Vlad the Impaler. He inflicted this type of punishment on all enemies, but notably, as he retreated from a battle in 1462, he left a field filled with thousands of impaled victims as a deterrent to pursuing Ottoman forces. Now, some believe Bran Castle was one of the sites in which Vlad reigned terror on Transylvania. Nowadays, it serves as a museum, and other must-see spooky sites within its walls include a golden casket that holds the heart of Romania's Queen Marie. In 4th place, we have Chillingham Castle in England. So billed as Britain's most haunted castle, Chillingham Castle has a horrific history of prisoner-ridden dungeons and well-used, punishment chambers. Look, the interweb doesn't like me using the T word when talking about people, so punishment is the next best way to describe it. Its roll call of resident ghosties include the whimpering blue boy, the pantry's white lady, and the perpetually lonesome Lady Mary Berkeley. Now, obviously I'm going to talk in detail about the spirits. Y'all know how much I love a good mystery lady, so I'll start with her. Why leave the best for last when I can choose instant gratification? In what is called the inner pantry, a frail figure in white is known to appear. So the silver was stored there once upon a time, and a footman was employed to sleep there and guard it, which, sounds like a pretty easy job for the most part. Historically, one night, when the footman had turned in to sleep, he was accosted by this lady in white, and she was very pale, and she begged him for water. And originally he thought it was one of the castle guests, so he turned to obey, before he remembered that he was, locked in and no visitor could possibly have entered. When he turned back to confront her, he found she had had vanished. Now the same pale figure is seen to this day, and it is thought the longing for water suggests poisoning. Heck of a way to go, but let's move on to the Blue Boy, shall we? Also known as the Radium Boy, he's a phantom known to haunt the pink bedroom, my favorite color. His pitiful cries can be heard at the stroke of midnight, and he appears as an orb or a halo of blue light, often close to a passage leading to a tower. The glowing figure occasionally manifests itself as a little boy dressed in blue, ergo how the moniker came to be. This apparition has been linked to the bones of a little one found walled up in the castle, which were found during renovation work in the early 20th century. Remnants of moldering blue fabric were discovered along with the skeleton. Poor fellow. I hope he gets the chance to cross over someday. Well, we can't forget to mention the tragic Lady Mary Berkeley, who passed in 1719. She was the wife of Lord Grey of Wark and Chillingham, who abandoned her to run off with her sister, Henrietta, causing, quite the scandal. The heartbroken Lady Mary was left with her newborn, wandering the halls of the castle, longing for the return of her errant husband. He never returned, and she apparently never left. Visitors to the castle have reported the rustle of silk, accompanied by an unearthly chill, which has been interpreted as indication Lady Mary has passed by on her sad vigil. She is said to be buried just beyond the castle in the tiny medieval church of St. Peter's in the village of Chillingham. Less notable interactions take place in the chapel, beside the Great Hall, where the voices of two men are often heard talking. It is never possible to follow their words, and they stop talking if one makes serious efforts to trace them. So, who wants to spend a night there? Fine, I'll call up my close friends and beg them. In third place, we have the Vorgard Castle in Denmark. So in the northeastern Danish town of Dronninglund, Vorgard Castle is renowned for its dark past. The most famous tale tells the story of Ingeborg Skeel, who acquired the castle in 1578 and drowned its architect in the moat so that he could never design another building as beautiful as this one. Well then, that takes gatekeeping to a whole new level. Skeel was an enterprising and highly skilled businesswoman, and therefore despised by a large percentage of the local population. Ah yes, a woman in power scaring people. I'd love to say I'm shocked, but not really. If anything, I'm just impressed. The stories about her evil misdoings are many, and after her death in 1604, she haunted the castle to such an extent that a priest was called in to perform an exorcism and lay her spirit to rest in a nearby marsh. People today report seeing Skeel's cranky ghost wandering through the castle at night dressed in white. Oh, don't worry, there's more. In the northeastern tower room, there is a stain on the floor, which originates from someone having been killed in that spot. The residue of an innocent life source that has been shed and cannot be removed. The stain was all but forgotten for many years, but when the room was renovated in 1997, the year I was born, the stain reappeared as many years' varnish was sanded off. And no matter how much the floor is sanded, the stain always reappears after a few days. Also, in a display case at the castle lies the skin of a wild boar brought down in the castle grounds during the 18th century. As the wild boar was brought down on the border between Vorgard and Hunsland, a minor feud arose, resulting in a sharing of the spoils. And since this castle got the skin, you can guess how that was split. According to legend, the wild boar skin must never be removed from the grounds, or the entire castle will come crashing down to the ground. Alrighty, so keep all the minimalist interior designers away from the castle, and anyone who wants to burn animal furs. It's not worth such a great haunted home for. Oh, and I guess history and architecture as well. But you gotta keep the ghosties happy. In second place, we have Pajama Castle in Slovenia. So built within a cave in the middle of a towering cliff, this castle, which dates back to 1272, is imposing by most visible standards. Once the residence of Knight Erazam Luger, Pajama has hidden passageways and was reputedly a site of vicious punishment and treachery. Now, Luger was betrayed by his servants and killed in the castle, and is said to haunt it still today. Now, because the castle was built to defend itself, it had some other surprises as well. It has holes in the ceiling of the entrance tower for pouring down boiling oil onto intruders and a very dark dungeon. There was a space in between the walls of the dungeon made to break people in the wall, and bones have since been found inside the thick wall. Oh, cripes, I should really backtrack. If you were an enemy and captured, you were brought to court, which overlooked the small punishment chamber. In the courtroom, there's a door leading to a lovely 63-meter vertical cave drop, so either you were, physically punished or executed on the spot, nothing in between. On the bottom of this shaft, the bones of the unfortunate souls still rest and have never been recovered. Some say the captured souls of the people who got locked in during the 1511 earthquake also still try to get out. Well, it's, business as usual during the day. Even employees of the museum make sure to exit before sundown. So, you're telling me that I could easily plan a slumber party there without worrying about security? Road trip! In first place, we have Leap Castle in Ireland. So built somewhere between the 13th and late 15th century, this Irish castle has apparently seen more gruesome deaths than a Game of Thrones wedding. Alrighty, so let's unpack that. As legend has it, during a struggle for power within the O'Carroll clan, who had a fondness for poisoning dinner guests, one brother plunged a sword into another, a priest, as he was holding mass in the castle's chapel. The room is now called the Bloody Chapel, and the priest is said to haunt the church at night. In addition, during castle renovations in the early 1900s, workmen found a secret dungeon in the chapel with so many human skeletons that they filled 3 cartloads when they hauled them away. The dungeon in question was designed so that prisoners would fall through a trapdoor, have their lungs punctured by wooden spikes in the ground, and die a slow, horrific death within earshot of the sinister clan members above. I don't know if I should publicly congratulate how brilliant this is, but well, no one should try and recreate this horror. You've got to give credit where credit is due for some really smart design plans. Numerous people were imprisoned and executed in the castle, and it is said that that's one of the reasons why the castle's haunted. One of the most terrifying beings which reside in the castle has simply been called It. No, not Pennywise. It is a small creature about the size of a sheep and has a decaying face, and is believed that when it appears, it is accompanied by the smell of sulfur and the smell of a decaying corpse. Yeah, yucky. Yeah, no thank you, moving on. There are also the elementals, which are believed to occur mainly in the countryside, where they have attached themselves to a particular place. When the castle's ownership was transferred to the Darbys, Mildred Darby dabbled in the occult, as it was, the fashion during the day, and it's widely believed that this practice resulted in the awakening of the elemental. She even wrote about her frightening ordeal back in 1909. She was standing in the gallery when she felt someone put a hand on her shoulder, and when she looked, she saw a thing about the size of sheep with a gaunt inhuman face, black cavities for the eyes, and it had the smell of a decomposing corpse. Once again with the icky smells. Hard pass. Shadows are also seen wandering the priest's house, which has been an empty shell since burning in 1922. A burly man has been seen pushing a heavy barrel up the stairs. The barrel rolls down, and then the man and the barrel disappear. The Red Lady has been encountered by many people as well, and heck yes, a mystery lady. The story goes that the Red Lady is the ghost of a woman captured and sexually taken advantage of by the O'Carrolls, which resulted in pregnancy. The O'Carrolls killed the result of that, and in despair, this lady killed herself. The Red Lady has been seen carrying a dagger in her hand and raising it menacingly as if wanting to stab someone. And hey, sounds valid to me. 2 young ladies have been seen and heard playing in Leap Castle, and they go by the names of Emily and Charlotte. Now, Emily died at the age of when she fell from the battlements, and many people have seen her ghost falling from the castle and disappearing before hitting the ground. Well, I hope they're at least having fun together. I'm forgetting one last thing. Cripes. What is it? Oh, right! There is also the M-U-R-D-E-R hole room called the Muckle Hole Room. Look, the internet doesn't like that M word, but I couldn't just sidestep it, so I hope y'all can spell. There's a red stain on the floor of that room, and it is said to be that of the man who was impaled to death by his brother during a quarrel for ownership of the castle. Yeah, that's an extreme case of sibling rivalry right there. In 5th place, we have Isla de las Muñecas, Mexico. So the island of the dolls in Mexico is like something straight out of a horror movie, but my kind of horror movie, or perfect place. Located on Teshuilo Lake, it is home to hundreds of hanging, slowly decaying dolls, thanks to a man named Don Julian Santana. So over 50 years ago, Don Santana left his wife and child and moved onto an island on Teshuilo Lake in the Exoquímico canals. I promise I tried to say it right. Let me know in the comments if I got it wrong. According to him, a young woman actually drowned in the lake in the 1950s, and he devoted his life to honoring this lost soul by collecting and hanging up dolls by the hundreds. Eventually, Don transformed the entire island into a doll-infested wonderland. So he began collecting lost dolls from the canals and the trash near his island home. He's also said to have traded produce he grew to locals for more dolls. But he didn't clean them up or attempt to fix them. He just put them up with missing eyes and limbs, covered in dirt and generally in whatever ramshackle state he found them in. Even when the dolls arrived to him in good shape, the wind and weather turned them into cracked and distorted versions of themselves, which I love. He also kept his cabin filled with dolls, which he dressed in headdresses, sunglasses, and other accessories as need be. So despite the fact that most people found this island frightening, he saw the dolls as beautiful protectors, as he welcomed visitors who he would show around, charging just a small fee for taking photos, just for upkeep and stuff. In 2001, Don Santana was found drowned in the same area, in which he believed that a woman had died. So according to legend, the dolls and the island are haunted by the spirits of the dead girl, and perhaps even by, Don himself. Alrighty, so after all that, who wants to go on a road trip with me? Anyone? Look, as long as we leave the dolls alone, I'm sure the curse won't follow us home. Okay, I'm 50% certain, but still. Let's go. In 4th place, we have Lokrum and Daxa in Dubrovnik, Croatia. So both of these places have such dark histories that I couldn't leave either of them out. They work so well together. One of them, Lokrum, is accessible by a regularly scheduled, kinda crowded, taxi boat, whereas the other, Daxa, has no links to the mainland and is actually avoided by locals. So legends and suspicions have surrounded this beautiful island of palm trees and pines since its long-term residents were removed in 1798. So settled on Lokrum since the early around 11th century in the community of Benedictine monks were evicted by Napoleon's troops. The night before their expulsion, the troops placed a curse on those who usurped the sacred ground. Half a century later, Habsburg royal Maximilian, the younger brother of the Emperor Franz Joseph, bought Lokrum. He converted the monastery complex into his pleasure gardens, spending many a happy summer having exotic trees and plants planted and colorful birds imported. He later met his end by execution, even though close friends tried to give him an escape that he didn't accept because, get this, he felt shaving his beard to disguise himself would undermine his dignity if he were to be recaptured, which, I think that tells me plenty about his character. Oh, and from the exclusive beach bistro of the 5-star hotel, Daxa is usually just referred to as another, splash of green in an idyllic panorama of islands that tends to hang out. And if you're looking at the map, Daxa is pretty close, like you could almost swim there. But the dotted lines around it kind of indicating sailing routes that really avoid it on purpose, skirting around to just avoid it no matter what. So kind of like Lokrum, in medieval times Daxa was first inhabited by monks, although later well-to-do travelers ignored it, preferring the larger, more accessible island to relax. In October of 1944, partisans were expelling pro-German Nazi forces from great swaths of what would become post-war Yugoslavia, and they arrived in Dubrovnik. Rounding up hundreds of sympathizers, including the city's mayor and local priests, they then took a certain number over to Daxa and executed them. Citizens were warned not to look for their loved ones in any case because there were no graves or burial plots. Dubrovnik simply got on with being part of Yugoslavia, and Daxa was never visited. If it was discussed, the talk turned to ghosts and the bad spirits that haunted the island. And in 2009, someone stumbled on the remains of several bodies. Forensic investigation revealed that there were 53 adult males, some carrying religious items associated with priesthood. A plot was created for reburials and a memorial erected. But even today, very few people visit Daxa, and it's abandoned and pretty much overgrown, so its secrets are hidden, and I'm good. In third place, we have Dead Man's Island. Even though it's kind of close to the public, Dead Man's Island is home to ghostly lore that is centuries old, so of course I had to talk about it. The list of spectral sightings and strange phenomena grows by the year, ranging from loud clanging noises that ring out in the dead of the night, to hurried footsteps that pace back and forth, or the unearthly moan of a young woman's sobs that fill the air. Tales of supernatural encounters stretch back more than a century, so the Squamish people call the place the Island of Dead Men. And a very long time ago, it said it was the site of a fierce battle. We're talking like northern and southern nations fought over claims to this plot of land. Now, the southern nation kidnapped 200 women, younglings, and elders from the north and held them captive. But when 200 young northern warriors traded themselves for the hostages' freedom, they were cut down on the spot. In the 1860s, the government offered to sell the land to one Samuel Brighouse. He declined the offer, but one of his partners, John Morton, decided why not. He rode to the island where he found hundreds of red cedar boxes scattered, amongst the foliage and perched in the upper branches of the tree, and quickly discovered they were fragile. When he reached up to touch one of them, it crumbled above his head, showering him with the bones of its long deceased inhabitant. Yeah, nope, that's when you run for the hills and say, no thanks. In the 1890s, a plague descended upon Vancouver, and Dead Man's Island was used as a pest house. So those who fell ill were sent to the island for quarantine. And if they got better, they were allowed to return home. If not, they never left. From 1899 to 1930, this island was home to a logging dispute. Local authorities and residents alike were kind of outraged by it, and at 6:30 a.m. on April 24th of 1899, when the developer headed out to the island with 30 men, then Mayor James Garden brought almost the entire police force with him to the island. When the developer attempted to cut down a tree, he and his men were arrested. Now, several similar episodes dotted the decades until the lease expired in 1930. In a 1909 incident, police occupied the island overnight to keep loggers at bay, and claimed they heard the rattling of dead man's bones and shrieking skeletons that threatened to haunt anyone who dared cut down trees on the island. The island is home to too many bodies to count. First Nations people, British merchant sailors, early pioneer residents of Moodyville, Hastings Sawmill and the Granite Town site, Canadian Pacific Railway workers who died during construction, victims of the Great Vancouver Fire of 1886, those who succumbed to smallpox, and, possibly some of the squatters who made the island their home for many years. No. Absolutely not. That's way too many dead bodies for my liking. Way too many spirits and angry ghosties. Absolutely not. In second place, we have the island of Poveglia. So the island is located in the lagoon near Venice and is famous for being one of the most haunted places in Italy. Tourists and locals alike are banned from this place, which was used for centuries as a place to exile the sick to prevent the spread of disease and, contain the mentally ill in an asylum built in the late 1800s. Yes, I'll backtrack and elaborate, and it's kind of similar to Dead Man's Island, but worse. In 1348, the bubonic plague arrived in Venice and Poveglia, and like many other small islands at the time, it became a quarantine colony. The plague on average killed like 1 out of 3 Europeans, and fearing the spread of the disease, Venice exiled many of its symptom-bearing citizens there. So if you sneeze, off you go. At the island's center, the dead and those too sick to protest were burned on giant pyres, and now this includes the tens of thousands of citizens dying on the mainland. And those fires would burn once more in 1630 when the Black Death again swept through the city. The small island was used as a mass burial ground, and ashes from human remains make up as much as 50% of the island's soil. Grapes, I hope it's a good fertilizer. The deaths of nearly 160,000 people on the island have given it its nickname, the Island of Ghosts. Now, a doctor at that asylum that I mentioned a moment ago was known to have experimented on patients with, crude lobotomies, and he jumped from the bell tower in the 1930s after claiming he had been driven mad by ghosts. I wonder why. You torture people and they're gonna haunt you in the afterlife? Go figure. Decades later, nearby residents claim to still hear the bell, even though it was removed many years earlier. A report titled Haunted History states that some restoration work had started in recent history, but abruptly stopped without explanation. Okay, maybe this is one spot on today's list I don't want to visit. And in first place we have Bell Island. So time to travel to Newfoundland, Canada, but more specifically, the claustrophobic rocky mining tunnels. So there's a sense of miner spirit watching from every corner and crevice in this world, where the shadows flicker and the darkness, it's just heavy. So between when the mines opened in 1895 and the last mines closed in 1966, there were 106 fatalities and, triple those accidents. Miners lost arms, legs, some were left disfigured, while others died of lung disease. No big. Heritage Newfoundland and Labrador reported in 1938 that a methane gas explosion in the number 6 mine killed 2 men and injured several others. In the 1950s, with the implementation of more powerful and faster machinery, miners were often killed or wounded by runaway ore cars and falling debris, to name just a couple of disasters. At the start of the mining, men wore felt baseball hats with the only light flickering from the dull glow of a candle on top and a tin lamp burning seal oil perched on a rocky ledge. Safety improved by a smidgen around 1911 with the introduction of carbide lamps. And in 1935, miners wore battery-powered electric lights. But before all those great improvements, miners had no proper bathrooms or eating facilities, there was no warmth, and they worked 10 to 12-hour shifts for 6 days a week for 5 to 7 cents an hour, seeing the sunlight only on Sundays. Okay, that sounds like me, but I swear, I do take a day off. Boys as young as 10 worked alongside men as old as 80, picking ore off the conveyor belts, separating the trunks by size and discarding the waste. The site contained 4 major underground mines called number 2, 3, 4, and 6, which I've already mentioned, and they ran about, 3 to 5 miles in length. And then on the surface, there were 2 more mines called the number 1 and the number 5 that were mined out before, going underground. And what's left of the number 4 mine, folks have heard muffled disembodied whispering, felt an icy wind rush past, footsteps, and often there's a dreadful feeling of being watched. Now, the most unfriendly character to roam the area is not a long-dead miner entering or leaving the tunnels, but a vengeful white woman. So women back then were considered to bring bad luck if they entered a mine, or even walked onto the mining site. Yeah, I can vouch for the fact that miners, similar to actors, can be very superstitious people. Remember, I'm from a Canadian gold mining town myself. Now, the white woman began to appear in the 1940s. And remember how I mentioned the mines didn't have running water? Yeah, the men would collect buckets from a well. So one day when the men went to collect water, and to their horror, discovered the body of a young woman, dressed in all white, floating in the well. Her skin had turned an icy blue in, the post-mortem state, and shortly after removing the body from the well, mine number 4 became a hub of paranormal activity. Men that were heading home after a long shift would get fiercely attacked by this woman. And wounded, they got treated at the nearby hospital, and those events would happen until about the mid-1960s, after the discovery of the killer. Well, the turn of the 19th century dispelled many of the long-standing myths and legends that were once pretty common on the island. In some cases, they actually got replaced with all new supernatural horrors. Bell Island has been labeled the most haunted island in North America. So, moving forward, in the early 20th century up until the 1950s, the island had a blend of ethnicities. We're talking English, Irish, Scottish, German, and more. And they've all got their own superstitions as well. Before Newfoundland joined Canada as a province, it was a lawless place, filled with sailors, stowaways, misfits, and, the folklore got really mixed with the macabre. Wherever you found a piece of land, you planted your home, and there's a lot of things that happen that people still can't explain. What was I forgetting? Oh right, I almost forgot about the fairies. Once there was a man on Bell Island who actually disappeared for quite some time, and when he returned, he was totally different. He suddenly developed a serious speech impediment and walked hunched over with a cane in a jerky, unstable fashion. So the rumor was that the fairies took him. And hey, at the time, most of the community gossiped about this. According to locals, it's very common in old Newfoundland stories that if people have some kind of interaction with fairies, they are changed as a result. People in Newfoundland will also talk about a blast, where they will get an injury of some kind, like they'll trespass on fairy ground and they'll be struck with the fairy arrow, and then they'll get like a boil or a lump or something that's going to form on their body. And when that lump is cut open, things such as feathers and twigs are going to come out of that wound. And with what I know about fairies, this is officially the scariest curse on the list. They're very much something one does not mess with. Trust me. In 5th place, we have Knockton Hall Hospital. So it was built in 1530 and originally meant for residential use, but served as a hospital for American officers who were injured in World War I. It was used once more as a military hospital during World War II and has been used in a similar capacity ever since, but no more. In the 1980s, it was once again put to private use, but by the 1990s, a significant fire had rendered it uninhabitable. Time for the dark stuff. It's alleged that one of the male owners of the home sexually took advantage of and killed a young girl. Today, her presence has been reported by various people who were in the building. Many people claim to have seen the ghostly image appearing at exactly 4:30 a.m. since she's fond of standing at the end of staff members' beds in the middle of the night. Interesting that she chooses the 4 a.m. hour to appear, since 3 a.m. is usually the preferred time for spirits, since that's when the veil between our world and theirs is the thinnest. So this spirit has been blamed for the disembodied sound of sobbing around the building. The building is also said to have a resident gray lady, but information around her is a lot harder to find, so let me know in the comments if, there's any experts out there, because any ghostie with a missing story is super intriguing to me. In 4th place, we have the Trenton State Hospital, originally known as the New Jersey State Lunatic Asylum, later Trenton State, and now Trenton Psychiatric Hospital. It was the very first one founded on the Kirkbride Plan by activist Dorothea Dix, but it's more remembered for, its medical no-nos instead of its well-intentioned beginnings. Dr. Henry Cotton became the director of the hospital in 1907 and instituted treatments based on his own theories of mental illness. On the one hand, Henry, who had trained at Johns Hopkins under the eminent Swiss-born psychiatrist Adolf Meyer, had a very progressive attitude towards care for his patients. He did away with the mechanical restraints that so many other hospitals use to control patients, introduced occupational therapy, increased the staff, and ensured that the nurses would prevent violence against the patients, and instituted daily staff meetings about patient care. But Henry developed a dangerous theory about mental illness, one that turned his hospital into a house of horrors. After it was confirmed in 1913 that the spirochete that caused syphilis can cause the disease's psychiatric symptoms, Henry began to suspect that all mental illness was caused by bodily infections, and that the only way to cure the patient was to remove the offending infection. In 1917, he began removing his patients' teeth, even in cases where x-rays showed no evidence of infection. Ow! He soon moved on to the other body parts: gallbladder, stomachs, ovaries, testicles, tracts of colon, uteruses. Henry claimed a cure rate of 85%, but in reality his surgeries had an unconsciously high mortality rate, and he didn't always obtain consent from the patients or their family members, and in fact sometimes performed these removals despite their protests. And hey, if that isn't icky enough, he wasn't quiet at all about what he was doing. The crazy doctor published papers and gave presentations on his work. When Mayer, Henry's mentor, sent another psychiatrist to report on the operations at Trenton State, he initially suppressed the report, allowing Henry to continue his gruesome work. He remained at Trenton until 1930, 3 years before his death. Now, the tooth pulling practice remained in place until 1960, and my mouth hurts thinking about it. Before I get nightmares, time to move on to the fun stuff. As for the ghosts themselves, they are thought to all be those of patients that died within the building, but the most well-known ghost is that of Dr. Henry himself, who has been seen wearing a white doctor's coat and walking down the corridor in the area outside his office. The most commonly reported phenomenon at the hospital is that of disembodied voices, mainly muffled screams and moans coming from distant rooms. Orbs can be caught throughout the building at any time of the day, with some having a strong pale blue glow to them. There are also tales of seeing the ghosts of patients with arms and legs missing, who have been seen in some of the rooms upon, somebody entering them, only to fade away after a few seconds. See, the ghosts of patients I'd love to see, but I feel like seeing Henry would terrify me for a while now that I know, what he did in his lifetime. A lovely example of why to not enable people who do bad things. In 3rd place, we have the London Asylum for the Insane. So in 1870, London introduced its first asylum, and as one of the first institutions to treat mental illness in Ontario, Canada, it was, revolutionary. Hey, within days, their 500 beds were full. So it was located just outside of the city center, and the asylum initially focused on compassionate care and moral therapy. Their intent was to treat the patient as a whole being, rather than, focusing on a single symptom. Patients would be bettered as members of society, fitting in with the community by keeping steady jobs and following strict social norms, thus, curing their mental illnesses. Now, while conforming to the ideals of conservative society sounds horrid to me, I do understand that at the time it was probably a safe move. The world is a lot more forgiving now of individuality and understanding of differences, even though we still have a long way to go. So doctors at the asylum also performed several experimental surgeries. In fact, Dr. Richard Maurice Buck, who believed, failed reproductive organs to be the source of mental illness or hysteria in women, executed routine hysterectomies. Moving into the 1930s, shock therapy was introduced to treat symptoms of schizophrenia by inducing seizures. Lobotomies were also completed between 1944 and 1967. While we don't know how many were performed in, London specifically, there are about 1,000 between these 23 years across Ontario. One reason that someone would be sent to the asylum includes sexual deviation. What is, shockingly expectant is that body self-love was identified as the root cause of a majority of mental illnesses. So Dr. Buck thought he had remedied this self-harm by inserting a metal wire into the foreskin of a man's penis so that the act would be too painful and uncomfortable. So what this doctor did not know is, that self-love is actually a positive action for sexual health and is not the cause of mental illness, as he would later discover after 11 failed attempts of reversing what he did. What am I forgetting? Feel like there's something I haven't mentioned yet. Oh, right. Ghosts. There was a tree at the main door which was dead and black in color, while vegetation was growing all around it, and that was the tree that patients ended their lives from. The chapel is known to be haunted, with the temperature inside always feeling ice cold, even though it might be sweltering hot outdoors, and the recreation building has also been known to be the home of many unknown ghosts. But the one ghost you want to avoid is that of the bad doctor himself, who passed away on the grounds in February of 1902 when he paused to gaze at the stars one winter's night and lost his balance and, died from the resulting head injury. It's alleged that he was pushed by the ghost of one of his patients who had died from his morbid experimentation, but sadly the mortality rate, like I mentioned before, was so high that we don't know which patient it was. In second place, we have the Topeka State Hospital. So according to the Topeka Capital Journal, a reporter visited the facility at some point during the early 20th century and saw a patient who had been strapped down for so long that his skin had begun to grow over his restraints. So according to my research, this would take many months, if not years, to do so. So I am shuddering. Other patients were chained up, well naked, for months at a time. For many residents at that time, however, life offered a different, similar sort of hell, even if they were unrestrained and unending boredom. Patients were given nothing to do, nothing to stimulate their minds, and so they sat in rocking chairs in the hallway all day, rocking and staring and doing nothing else. Thankfully, in 1948, Kansas Governor Frank Carlson, responding to, reports of overcrowding and deplorable conditions, convened a panel to, study the problem. The state legislature ended up doubling the appropriations for mental hospitals, and the rocking chairs were removed from the hallway. However, the hospital lost its Medicare and Medicaid accreditation in 1988, and like so many hospitals, lost patients to community-based programs during the 1990s. In 1997, the year I was born, the hospital closed its doors for good. The ghosts that wander what's left of the hospital are those of former patients, which I know, I'm sounding like a broken record. Oh, there's a cemetery on the hospital grounds, which is, the final resting place of patients who died in the hospital. Only 16 of the 1,157 graves have headstones, and most of the souls are left nameless. Visitors to the hospital grounds report seeing orbs and hearing strange moans coming from the cemetery. Yeah, no thank you. In first place, we have Century Manor. So built in 1884 on the outskirts of Hamilton, Ontario, Century Manor was the second major structural component of the Hamilton Asylum for the Insane, an institution initially established for the treatment of alcoholics. Newspaper articles published in the late 19th and early 20th centuries documented at least 9 self-deaths committed in the building, as well as several attempts made by inmates who escaped the hospital. Century Manor was also the scene of several strange accidents and horrific crimes. One female patient fell to her death while attempting to, escape out a window using a rope made from bed sheets, while another had her skull crushed by a falling elevator. One particularly troublesome male inmate was allegedly slugged to death by orderlies, while another split open the head of the asylum's head baker with an axe. No biggie, right? Apparently the living conditions were so bad that in 1910, a former inmate wrote a letter to the Legislative Assembly of Ontario, stating that the place was an outrage to civilization. Let me Allow me to read what he said. Wretched, vile torment is the order of the institutions. He had seen patients pounded, choked insensible time and time again until redness would run from their nostrils. Oh, I haven't even gotten to the most dramatic tale yet. In the early morning hours of August 11th on 1911, a fire mysteriously broke out on the building's top floor. Firefighters who battled the blaze said that 3 of the inmates they rescued from the burning building broke away from them and leapt back into the inferno. When the embers finally cooled, firefighters found 8 bodies amongst the ashes, including a paralytic who had burned to death in his cell, as well as 5 men huddled together in a small room. Burnt to a crisp. Now, the historic building shut its doors for good in 1995 and has sat empty ever since, serving as a haunting reminder of Hamilton's dark and tragic history. And now that we've got the history out of the way, time to talk about the ghosties. My favorite part. Underneath the property of Century Manor lies a system of old tunnels. This first-hand account comes from Jeff Cooper, who was hired to guard the entire West 5th property overnight, and on one particular evening, he was making his rounds and ended up underground and inside the tunnels. He made a turn at one of the corners and found himself lost in a hallway with just one wooden door at the end. He heard voices coming from the other side of the door, so he walked up to it, quickly braced himself, took a few deep breaths, and swung the door open. There, sitting at a table in the middle of a small, dirty old room, were 2 women dressed in old-fashioned nurses' uniforms. They both slowly turned and stared at him directly in the eye, until one of them spoke up and calmly said to the other, "See? I told you he'd find us." The security guard was so frightened that he backed out of the room, slammed the door behind him, and caught his breath. He gathered his nerves a second time and slowly opened the door to a completely empty room. The nurses had disappeared from the room, with no other exits being apparent or visible. The ghosts of the men who lost their lives in the fire are also known to roam what's left of the establishment, so if any urban explorers smell smoke while they're there, don't say I didn't warn ya. And that brings us to the end of our time, and my heart truly goes out to anyone who suffered in those awful, awful places. Yeah, goodness gracious. While I do joke about borrowing a time machine on occasion, today was a good reminder of why I truly belong in my current time period, and how unpleasant history. Number 5, McCamey Manor. Alrighty, before someone yells at me, yes, this place does market themselves as a haunted house, or to quote the founder Russ, a survival horror performance house. But since they're currently offering 20 grand to anyone who can survive 10 hours of their games, I'm considering them eligible for today's list. Granted, if you curse or fail a challenge, $500 gets removed each time. And I've also had a personal vendetta against them for about 10 years now, and that's about to come into play. So founder Russ McCamey, a former Navy seaman turned haunted attraction enthusiast, doesn't accept any kind of money for this unique experience. Payment is simply, a can or a bag of dog food. There is a screening process first. Participants must produce a doctor's note, sign a 40-page waiver, pass a background check and test, and be screened via FaceTime. A guide has testified that the 40-page waiver signed by participants lists possible risks, which include having teeth extracted, being tattooed, and having fingernails removed. If I didn't already hate the place enough, that does it for me. That's just unnecessary torment. It originally operated in San Diego, but neighbors petitioned to have it run out of the area due to the noise and unsafe attention it brought them, and were successful. There's a total of 3 locations now: Nashville, Tennessee, and Huntsville, Alabama. At the Tennessee location, guests must be 21 or older, or 18 to 20 with parental consent, while the Alabama location only allows ages 21 or up. The tour lasts from 8 to 10 hours, but no guest has made it all the way through. McCamey originally did not allow safe words for the tour, but has since reportedly allowed them, with guests having the option to use a safe word that ends the experience immediately. The house operates year-round, and there is allegedly a waiting list of over 24,000 people. I just want to know why. During the experience, employees of the manor may physically attack patrons, waterboard them, force them to eat and drink unknown substances, have them bound and gagged, and engage in other forms of physical and psychological anguish. I'm forgetting something. Don't remind me. Oh yeah, participants may also be during their experience. And hey, if that wasn't enough ick for anyone, make sure to smile for the camera while you're enduring this hell. Yeah, McCamey started filming everything that happened inside as an insurance policy, so he'd have proof of what really happened anytime law enforcement came knocking. Nowadays, each contestant's experience is live streamed to a Facebook audience of close to 30,000 people. If that's your idea of entertainment, there's a large archive of footage on the official website. So far, no one's been able to escape, and I'm pretty sure everyone leaves with some sort of imprint on their psyche, so big pass from me. Number 4, Eloise Asylum. Eloise Psychiatric Hospital was a large complex located in Westland, Michigan that operated from 1839 to early 1982. It started out as a poorhouse and farm. It eventually developed into an asylum, sanatorium, and hospital. It's had a lot of names over the years, so bear with me here. In 1832, it was called the Wayne County Poorhouse. In 1872, it was the Wayne County Almshouse, while in 1886, it was referred to simply as the Wayne County House. In 1913, there were 3 divisions: the Eloise Hospital, which housed the the mental hospital, the Eloise Infirmary or the poorhouse, and the Eloise Sanatorium, which housed patients with tuberculosis, and all three were collectively called Eloise. Oh, and that's not the end of the name changes. In 1945, it was named Wayne County General Hospital and Infirmary at Eloise, Michigan. By 1974, it had two divisions, separating the Wayne County Psychiatric Hospital from the General Hospital. In 1979, it was officially called Wayne County General Hospital, with the psychiatric division closing in 1982. In its heyday, Eloise was made up of 78 buildings on 902 acres with 10,000 patients along with 2,000 staff, serving as the largest psychiatric facility in the entire United States. Only the firehouse, power plant, commissary, and D buildings still stand as of July of 2023, as well as the cemetery. It had some good things back in the day, housing the first kidney dialysis unit in the state of Michigan and pioneering the use of music therapy. Staff also used hydrotherapy, shock therapy, and insulin therapy to treat patients. As years went on, the institution grew larger and larger, a reflection in the increases in the population of the Detroit area. From only 35 residents in 1839, the complex grew to, like I said, about 10,000 folks at its peak during the Great Depression. Now to talk about ghosties. My favorite part. Numerous typical poltergeist activities have been witnessed within the complex, with doors slamming and medical carts and tables being overturned. Generally speaking, there are shadow figures that seemingly drip from the ceilings and ooze from the walls of this place, becoming part of the building itself until they're one and the same. Two ghostly little ones have been seen running through the paint-peeling walls of the hallways, turning a corner only to disappear. It's assumed they were inmates at the time Eloise was a poorhouse, where orphans often lived until they were adopted out or passed away. So these two possibly died in their youth, or maybe they relive their lives now without the fear they had when they were alive, carelessly playing games in a kind of purgatory. There's a mysterious lady that appears as a white vapor and has been seen manifesting within one of the buildings that still stand, and her voice has been recorded as she whispers, "Help me." Another ghost is that of a doctor, said to prowl the halls of the crumbling facility. Even in the afterlife, he searches for an unfortunate patient to practice his scientific methods. Some have reported seeing a specter drenched in water, possibly a reminder of when hydrotherapy was coming into practice. Other times the ghostie is seen wearing a smock stained in red, presumed to be from a lobotomy. Possibly he lingers here, tormented by the ghosts of the patients upon whom he practiced. Nowadays, this building is home to two different escape rooms, one titled The Heist and the other is aptly called Escape the Asylum. If you feel like risking the wrath of the ghosts, that's on you. Number 3, 13 Seta Avenue. This is the only Canadian entry on today's list, and apparently it's the scariest escape room in the entire Greater Toronto area. Time to tell if my courage will kick in and motivate me to go check it out. So rumor has it, everyone who's experienced this particular escape room has experienced some sort of paranormal activity, which could be my cup of tea as long as it doesn't involve a Ouija board or spirits that follow me home. So according to the website, it is described as a group daring to venture through an abandoned house turns into a horrifying nightmare when you quickly realize it's not abandoned at all. So it's just a sick game, and you are the main attraction. You'll have to work together and overcome all the challenges. Watch out, not all groups make it out together. Now here's the haunted element. Some parts of the internet have listed it as running. Well, the official website changes depending on the day, on if it's still existing or not. Try and register if you dare. Who knows if you'll live to tell the tale. Number 2, Franklin County Historic Jail. Allegedly, the old Franklin County Jail is one of the most haunted locations in south central Pennsylvania and once housed quite the notorious prisoner. 1920s gangster Charlie Berger was held at the Franklin County Jail from June of 1927 to April of 1928, where he went the way of the rope necklace for the death of Joe Adams along with a plethora of other crimes. While he isn't the only ghostie that likes to hang out at the jail, apparently he can be spotted skulking around where he met the end of his time. Overall activity that has been reported includes shadows, mysterious noises, disembodied moans, being physically touched, and feelings of tension in certain areas. Time for a history lesson though. In the early 1700s, the land that would become Franklin County was settled and traveled by Native Americans, including the Iroquois, the Lenape, and the Shawnee. Treaties resulted in the land being settled by the English after the French and Indian War. In 1818, the Franklin County Jail was constructed to house criminals and those condemned to the gallows. The basement was used as a dungeon, where the condemned were often shackled, physically punished, or killed prior to their date with the noose in the courtyard. In 1862, as the nearby shops were all burned, the Franklin Jail remained untouched. The jail escaped damage again when Confederate General Robert E. Lee and 70,000 soldiers took up residence nearby, and once again in 1864, as a significant portion of Chambersburg was burned, the jail remained unscathed. If I had a nickel for everything I just thought was mighty suspicious, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but but it's weird that it happened twice. At least 7 known souls met their end at the gallows, and many more were subjected to inhumane treatment in the basement. Areas known to be haunted in the old prison include the old doctor's office, where spirits are known to recount their tales of poor treatment, the old cells where orbs have a habit of appearing in photos near certain names and dates etched into the walls, but the worst is the tension and cold felt in the basement where so many endured horrors and met their end. Nowadays, folks can get a feel of the life, behind its real prison bars thanks to the escape room on site. Prisoners are locked in the lower jail block cell and have to use puzzle-solving tactics in order to break out, and like most game rooms, they have 60 minutes to escape. Good luck! Number 1. Shepton Mallet Prison. So this prison is widely recognized as the most haunted prison in the world, and one of the most haunted locations in the UK. It was built in 1610 and became known as the oldest prison in the United Kingdom. Behind its walls, prisoners would frequently die of illnesses because medical treatment was sadly overlooked. Death sentences were frequently carried out, with the latest happening in 1945 under the direct order of the military. So it didn't actually close until 2013, so I think it's the most recently converted location on our list today. In the 1970s, the Home Office was requested to investigate some strange happenings in one of the wings. An increase in prisoners requesting additional bedding due to cold drop was becoming an issue, and the occasional smell of sweet perfume would waft around the prison. Prisoners were becoming uncomfortable in their cells, and officers started to refuse working the night shifts. So the office carried out a 3-day investigation, and the results remained inconclusive. As the years passed, new reports were coming in that the draughts would continue, as would the smell of sweet perfume. Some night officers would report seeing shadows and white figures standing on the stairs. The story of the White Lady was revealed after some research. So she had killed her husband and was brought to the prison for her final days before meeting her end in the town center. The night before her execution, she was offered her final request and asked to wear her wedding dress. The morning of her execution, the door to her cell swung open, and to the surprise of the officers, her lifeless body laid on the bed, dressed in the gown. No marks were found, and it was concluded that she must have died of a broken heart. She is said to still wander the wings and has been reported to be seen on multiple occasions. And if she isn't seen, the smell of a sweet perfume has been reported to linger in the prison wing. So the prison now advertises the escape room as a team building behind bars, where visitors learn the full details of the corrupt events that happened within the prison walls and then try their hand at escaping themselves. Yeah, no thanks.
Number 5. The Castle of Good Hope. Coming up first on our list of haunted hotspots is going to be the Castle of Good Hope in Cape Town, South Africa. It was first built in the 17th century by the Dutch East India Company, so you just know there's bad vibes there to begin with. It's the oldest colonial building in South Africa, and if you believe the local legends, it's allegedly one of the most paranormal spots in the country. The first reported paranormal sighting from the castle came from 1915, when a tall, pale, mysterious man dressed in black, he sounds familiar, whose attire didn't match the era at all, country or anything, appeared seemingly out of nowhere, walking alongside one of the castle's ramparts before vanishing as soon as he appeared. Now that's pretty weird, definitely, not quite enough to label a place haunted, but it was a one-off incident, right? Well, in 1947, this same strange man kept appearing, making regular visits for weeks on end. He'd be jumping off the castle's walls, seemingly plummeting to his doom, only to reappear again to do it all again. I gotta be honest, he sounds kinda sick, all things considered. Sounds like he just wants to bungee jump and vibe out as a ghost. Another popular story from the castle is that of former governor, one Peter Gijsbert van Noot. Whew, you try saying that 5 times fast. He passed in the castle on the 23rd of April, 1728, the same day he had sentenced 7 army deserters to the death sentence. The legend has it that one of these soldiers hexed him and demanded he face him and watch the execution. Van Noot was apparently a bit squeamish and refused the invitation, and later that day was found dead at his desk, slumped over. And some believe his ghost still wanders the castle's halls. And there were more ghosts I couldn't even fit into this one video because there's so many hauntings from this place. I recommend you read up about it afterwards. And if you want way more videos about haunted spots, ghosts, goblins, aliens, cryptids, conspiracies, true stories, fake stories, we got all of that and then some. So click through on Top 5 Scary, find something to watch, something to fall asleep to, I don't judge. Stay subscribed, stay scared, but stay watching this video. We worked hard on it. Alright, moving on through. Number 4, the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone. Maybe this one's a bit of an obvious pick, but our next entry is going to be the infamous Chernobyl Exclusion Zone, the real-life, post-apocalyptic wasteland of Pripyat. Have you ever heard the word canopsia? Maybe not. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right. I only learned this word today. But it refers to a feeling of seeing an atmosphere that you know is supposed to be populated, but isn't. And I feel like that word definitely applies to Chernobyl, or like liminal is a very good feeling too. It is kind of a liminal space because you see all of these buildings and you can imagine a life happening there, but it's frozen in time. The Chernobyl blast would be enough to cover a whole video and then some. I heard there was a very good HBO series about it. And trying to cover it in under 2 minutes would be foolhardy, so here's the super quick Coles Note versions. Is that a late night safety test simulating a station blackout power failure ended up starting a huge blast, which eventually threw radioactive material that blew all over Pripyat and the surrounding areas, causing everyone to have to pick up everything and evacuate, never to return. 50,000 people used to live here, and now it's a ghost town. And yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I only know that line from COD 4. All gillied up, best level in the series. That one's just for my gamers out there. Now you can actually visit Chernobyl, although they don't really recommend you do. You know, it's not a fun hotspot for tourism or anything. People who delve into the zone for recreation, or to find things, are called stalkers, named after the Tarkovsky movie of the same name, revolving around visits to a strange zone, and not the video game Stalker, where bandits raid the apocalyptic zone, although you would be forgiven for thinking that. Visiting the zone is no easy task. For one, it's recommended that you absolutely go with a guide or someone who knows the area very well, and then come all the requirements. You mustn't touch anything whatsoever. No vegetation. There are wild dogs that live in Chernobyl, and they're very cute, but you can't touch them at all because there could be traces of radiation in their fur. You have to wear an outfit that covers as much as possible. Big boots, you know, don't show up in your sunners and flip-flops. They recommend wearing a mask too to avoid inhaling any dust or, you know, any of the radioactive particles that could still be floating around in the air. Real life radiation, not half as fun as the comic books. You are very unlikely to come out of here with any web-slinging superpowers. More likely just gonna have a bad cough and, you know, your family's gonna get real sad. You're asked not to enter any buildings because some are so degraded that they could collapse literally at any minute with the wrong pressure applied somewhere, and then you're just another tragedy. Now, I've never been, but from pictures, Chernobyl genuinely seems unreal, like it's not part of the world, you know? It seems like it's something out of a movie or a video game, but it's this harrowing, soul-crushing reflection of our reality, a stark warning on the dangers of nuclear power, and a grim reminder that your life as you know it can be upended forever in but a moment. Number 3. Mausoleum of the First Qin Emperor, Qin Shi Huang. The tomb of former Emperor of China, Qin Shi Huang, is notable for many reasons. Maybe it was because in 1974, when farmers from the Shaanxi province were digging a well, they discovered hundreds upon hundreds of terracotta soldiers, complete with horses, chariots, officers, infantry, a court, I think even some bears, oh my. They discovered one of the world's greatest archaeological wonders, 2,000 terracotta soldiers in Qin Shi Huang's tomb. The tomb was built like this basically to serve as history's most impressive flex. Qin Shi Huang wanted to make it good and clear that even in death, he held more might and more power than anyone could ever imagine. You know that saying, you can't take it with you? Well, he wanted to take it with him. He wanted his own army to serve him in the afterlife. The wild part about this is we don't even know how far it goes, since it still hasn't fully been uncovered, even all these years later. Those thousands of terracotta soldiers might just be the first wave of guys. While he reigned, Qin Shi Huang wanted to make very sure that his tomb was a good approximation of his legacy, so thousands of laborers worked tirelessly for decades to create an emperor's tomb. They think that 700,000 laborers worked on this for 40 years. That's already unbelievable, but Qin Shi Huang only even lived to be 49, so good thing they got that done in time, eh? Qin Shi Huang himself is buried beneath an enormous pyramid mound that stands a good distance away from the rest of the tomb. Now here's where the haunted part starts to come in. According to historians, this central tomb contains treasures and wondrous objects he attained during his life, including a flowing river of pure mercury, which doesn't really sound like the greatest idea, but back then they thought that made you immortal. Soil testing the nearby areas does have elevated levels of mercury, so that might actually be true. No one is too eager to check though, since it sounds like Qin Shi Huang kitted this place out to keep any would-be Nathan Drakes or Lara Crofts from raiding this uncharted tomb. It's said that it's got ancient ballistas, and all sorts of traps like mechanisms that'll fire arrows at potential grave robbers. And hey, that mercury vapor probably isn't doing you any favors, so don't try to breathe that in. In any case, the Chinese government has been in no rush to explore what's down there. It's best to let the sleeping dead lie, especially when the sleeping dead has thousands of personal bodyguards, and it's probably haunted, let's be real. Number 2. Snake Island. Our next entry, Isla de Quimada Grande, is formally dubbed as Snake Island, which really should tell you right off the bat that whatever I'm about to describe is not a friendly place. Traditionally, places are only named things like Snake Island if they're like, you know, filled to bursting with snakes, or if they're home to like a snake-themed supervillain or something. I'm pretty sure the guys who fought G.I. Joe lived on Snake Island. Anyway, Snake Island is called that because by conservative estimates, there's roughly a snake for every square meter of the island, meaning there's anywhere from 4,000 golden lancehead vipers or more living there. There's more snakes than there are people, and that's because most Brazilian locals know way better than to go to an island where one of the most venomous snakes on the planet live. Yeah, I left that part out. Well, I'm talking about it now. It's not just like garter snakes slithering about here. Isla de Quimada Grande is home to the golden lancehead, a beautiful creature in its own right that just happens to be one of the most lethal bites to humans. A bite from this snake can cause, let's list off some fun side effects, kidney damage, necrosis, brain hemorrhaging, venom poisoning, and oh, my favorite, internal intestinal damage. So just leave them alone. Even if for some bizarre reason I've told you all of that and you just love going to places you're not meant to and you're just dying for a chance to go visit venomous Snake Island, you are going to run into a bit of trouble because it's literally forbidden. The Brazilian government strictly monitors those who travel. Naval forces do visit annually to maintain the lighthouse, and there's a research station to study and analyze the local population, but all of these visits are accompanied by paramedics and trained doctors, just in case any of the locals decide to say hello the only way they know how. Am I the only one who thinks the golden lancehead is kind of cute, like in a little weird way? I don't want one as a pet, but I don't know, I think these danger noodles have very cute little eyes, but maybe that's just one of my red flags. And number 1, Poveglia. This list has not been pleasant. I guess I should have expected that, given the tone of all of these wretched, horrible, and haunted places. So let's close this list off and find somewhere nice and sunny to get away from all of life's woes. Maybe somewhere nice like, I don't know, Italy? Maybe somewhere off the coast of Venice, like the island of Poveglia? Now, Poveglia is an infamous island in Italian history. It once served as a quarantine zone and final resting place for victims of the Black Plague. You know that one. As the plague ravaged Europe and paranoia set in across the lands, it was said that anyone who showed so much as a symptom, you know, if you had a runny nose, they shipped you off to Poveglia to live out the rest of your days. Oftentimes, they would send people who weren't even really sick. You know, you just complain about a headache trying to get a day off work and you're on a longboat to the last island you're ever going to go to. It's said that over 50% of the island's soil is made of burned human ash. Let that set in for a second. The ground itself is haunted. In the early 19th century, the island converted from a quarantine zone to a mental asylum because I guess it thought that that wasn't scary enough. The asylum did not do much to improve Poveglia's reputation. Instead of being home to the sick, now it was home to droves of mentally unwell patients being made into victims by a doctor's sick experiments. Cruel doctors at the asylum would impose their patients into lobotomies with no concern for sanitation or their safety, with chisels, drills, and rarely if ever using anesthetic. An old ghost story has it that the main doctor at the asylum was haunted by the spirits of his former patients and the crimes he'd committed, and it drove him to such madness that he cast himself off the bell tower of the island, where they say his screams can still be heard. Now, if I told you all of that and you still want to visit, first of all, why? And second of all, you're going to need to be pretty crafty, as it's totally, completely forbidden. You will be pressed to the fullest extent of the law if you're caught trespassing. Not even remotely worth the risk, if you ask me. At best, you get arrested. At worst, haunted for the rest of your days.
At number 5, the Ohio State Reformatory. The Ohio State Reformatory, a haunting architectural marvel that carries within its walls the echoes of a troubled past. Constructed in the late 19th century, this imposing Victorian Gothic structure was initially intended to embody progressive correctional ideals. However, over time, it became synonymous with stories of despair, shuddering, and unexplained phenomena, solidifying its reputation as one of the most haunted places in the United States. The reformatory's history is rife with tales of harsh conditions, overcrowding, and the struggles of those who were incarcerated within its confines. These factors, coupled with the tragic stories of inmates who lived and died there, have contributed to the pervasive sense of unease that envelops the site. Visitors often report strange occurrences, such as unexplained footsteps echoing through the empty halls, eerie whispers that seem to float on the air, and chilling cold spots that hint at otherworldly presences. In some cases, there have even been disappearances and killings, alluding to the dark spectral forces that inhabit the reformatory. One of the most famous aspects of the Ohio State Reformatory is its appearance in the movie The Shawshank Redemption. While the film highlighted the reformatory's grim atmosphere, its true history is far richer and more complex. The architecture itself tells a tale of a bygone era, with its intricate detailing and imposing structure standing as a stark contrast to the stories of suffering that unfolded within its walls. Guided tours and events at the reformatory allow visitors to explore its various sections, from the imposing cell blocks to the eerie solitary confinement area, known as the Hole, creating an immersive experience that evokes a sense of timelessness. The stark contrast between the ornate exterior and the haunting interior serves as a poignant reminder of the complex and often troubling history that defines the reformatory. While some may dismiss claims of paranormal activity as mere superstition, the stories and experiences recounted by those who have visited the Ohio State Reformatory are difficult to ignore. The combination of a somber history, decaying architecture, and the mysterious ambience that permeates the air makes for an unforgettable experience that lingers long after the visit is over. Number 4. Molly Stark Sanatorium. The former Molly Stark Hospital, located in Molly Stark Park in Ohio, is a haunting relic of a bygone era. Once a treatment center for tuberculosis patients, the decaying building exudes a ghoulish aura, with vines snaking over ancient brick, shattered windows, and faded stone. Closed for over 2 decades, the hospital's dilapidated state has attracted ghost hunters and paranormal enthusiasts, leading to the erection of a barbed wire fence to deter trespassers. Owned by the Stark County Park District, the property offers public tours to its exterior, revealing intricate architectural details and a fascinating history. The hospital, originally constructed in 1929 at a cost of around $1 million, treated tuberculosis patients until the 1970s, and later served as a mental health facility and a rehabilitation center for those suffering with addiction. The tour provides insights into the hospital's architectural flourishes, including a portico and stone-carved religious symbols, reflective of the faith that played a role in caring for those afflicted by tuberculosis. The hospital's conditions quickly began to decline in the mid-1970s, after reports of ghost sightings within the hospital. Patients and staff alike bore witness to the likes of victims of tuberculosis, despite the fact that treatment for the illness was invented 20 years prior. These now-deceased patients were known to disrupt medical examinations, cause mass hysteria among patients and staff, and even cause many disappearances within the hospital. The amount of distress these apparitions caused eventually led to the hospital's closure in 1995. Nowadays, the site's haunted reputation draws curiosity seekers, but the tour focused mostly on the building's history rather than the many ghosts that still scuffle about the old hospital. And number 3, South Base Island Lighthouse. Perched atop the rugged cliffs of South Base Island in Put-in Bay, the historic lighthouse stands as both a beacon of maritime history and a portal to a realm of ghostly legends. The South Base Island Lighthouse, with its iconic red brick tower and majestic views of Lake Erie, cast a haunting silhouette against the ever-changing skies, drawing visitors from far and wide who seek to unravel the mysteries that have enshrouded this hallowed site for decades. Built in 1897, the South Base Island Lighthouse served as a vital navigational aid for ships traversing the treacherous waters of Lake Erie. Its light guided sailors through storms and fog, ensuring safe passage to the shores. However, as time marched on and technology advanced, the lighthouse's significance diminished, eventually leading to its decommissioning in the mid-20th century. But as darkness descends upon the island, the lighthouse takes on an air of malevolence. The wind howls like the mournful wails of lost souls, while the crashing waves below create a symphony of despair. Those brave enough to step inside confront an unsettling stillness, punctuated only by the occasional creak of floorboards under an invisible, unrelenting force. Phantom shadows dance along the walls. There are ethereal forms casting an ominous dance that defies explanation. Visitors recount harrowing tales of icy fingers brushing against their skin, of ghostly whispers that worm their way into their minds, and of an overpowering sense of dread that lingers long after they've fled the premises. The lighthouse had to be shut down after several reports of it turning off at random times, or guiding sailors towards dangerous areas, despite being completely unmanned. One can only assume that this mischief was the work of the spirits that haunt the lighthouse. This forsaken lighthouse has earned its place among the most terrifying locales in Ohio, a reputation upheld by relentless tales of ghostly apparitions, unexplainable phenomena, and an atmosphere so saturated with maleficent energy that it leaves visitors trembling in its wake. Whether driven by morbid curiosity or a thirst for the macabre, those who dare to cross the threshold into the South Base Island Lighthouse do so at their own peril. For here, in the heart of the lighthouse's labyrinthine corridors, the boundary between the living and the spectral blurs, and the chilling embrace of the unknown reaches out to ensnare those who dare to seek it. And at number 2, Moonville Tunnel. Deep within the remote woods of southeastern Ohio lies a sinister enigma shrouded in darkness, the Moonville Tunnel. This desolate and haunted passage, long abandoned by the living, stands as a portal to a realm where reality intertwines with the supernatural, and where the unwary may find themselves vanishing into the void if they dare to tread too close. The Moonville Tunnel, a vestige of an era past, was once a vital conduit for a long-forgotten railway. Yet, as time eroded the tracks and decay seeped into its very stones, a chilling transformation occurred. Stories of ghastly apparitions and eerie encounters have swirled around the tunnel, like the mist that clings to its mouth. Tales whispered among locals with a mixture of dread and fascination. Daredevil adventurers who have ventured into the tunnel speak of an oppressive, tangible malevolence that envelops the air, an unrelenting presence that seems to watch, to wait, and to hunger for the unsuspecting. Perhaps the most sinister tale is that of the Moonville Tunnel's insatiable appetite for souls. It is said that if you step foot into the tunnel around 3 a.m., when the boundaries between worlds are at their thinnest, you may never step back out. Foolhardy wanderers who venture into its depths during the witching hour risk becoming mere specters themselves, forever trapped in a twilight realm of torment and despair. The tunnel's history is steeped in tragedy, adding to its ominous aura. Legends tell of a brakeman who met a grisly end beneath the wheels of an oncoming train, his anguished spirit now condemned to roam the dark expanse. Others speak of mournful phantom cries that pierce the silence, echoing the heart-wrenching despair of a long-lost soul. Visitors who dare to challenge the Moonville Tunnel's eerie reputation tread a perilous path, as the moonlight filters through the dense canopy, casting ghostly shadows upon the tunnel's yawning maw. A feeling of being watched intensifies. Footsteps echo with an eerie resonance, their sound swallowed by the blackness ahead. Time itself seems to warp, stretching and distorting reality as though beckoning the unwary to step beyond the veil. To approach the Moonville Tunnel is to court danger, to teeter on the precipice of the unknown. It is a place where the boundary between the living and the dead blurs, where the rules of our reality are subverted by forces beyond comprehension. As the wind whispers secrets and the very earth seems to hold its breath, those who venture too close may find themselves joining the ranks of the vanished, a chilling testament to the dark and untamed forces that linger within the haunted confines of Moonville Tunnel. Coming in at number 1, Franklin Castle. Franklin Castle, an imposing Victorian mansion nestled in the heart of Cleveland, Ohio, stands as an enigmatic edifice brimming with dark secrets and eerie tales that have earned it a reputation as one of the most haunted houses in America. With its intricate architecture, turrets, and ornate details, the castle's exterior belies the chilling stories that have swirled around it for generations. Built in the late 19th century by German immigrant and banker Hans Tiedemann, the Franklin Castle was intended to be a symbol of prosperity and opulence. However, as time passed, the mansion's grandeur began to fade, replaced by rumors of tragedy, scandal, and paranormal activity that would come to define its legacy. The Tiedemann family was plagued by a series of untimely deaths, including the passing of several youngsters and Tiedemann's wife. The pervasive aura of grief seemed to seep into the very walls of the castle, fostering an atmosphere of melancholy and despair. It is said that the spirits of the deceased still linger within its chambers, their presence felt by those who dare to venture inside. Over the years, reports of ghostly apparitions, disembodied voices, and unexplained phenomena have only added to the castle's haunted mystique. Visitors and paranormal enthusiasts alike have recounted chilling experiences, from encountering spectral figures that vanish into thin air, to hearing whispers that seem to drift from empty rooms. Cold spots and sudden drops in temperature are often attributed to the presence of otherworldly entities, and of course the few unlucky folks who, seemingly out of random, would receive the same curse as Tiedemann all those years ago. The castle's haunted reputation has been further fueled by the stories of secret passageways, hidden rooms, and a mysterious woman in black who is said to roam the halls. These elements, combined with the mansion's unsettling history, have led to countless investigations by ghost hunters and paranormal experts seeking to unlock its mysteries.
Starting off this list in our number 5 spot, we have the Ancient Ram Inn. Our journey into the spectral realm commences in the heart of the quaint yet mysterious English countryside where the Ancient Ram Inn stands. This timeless structure, steeped in history that spans more than a millennium, casts an imposing shadow that belies its innocent facade. The inn was erected in the 12th century atop a pagan burial ground, a detail that might send shivers down the spine of even the most seasoned paranormal enthusiasts. The Ancient Ram Inn is notorious among locals and ghost hunters alike, not merely for its haunted reputation, but for its resident entity, a fearsome demon known as the incubus. The incubus in mythology is a malevolent entity believed to prey on its victims during their sleep, and the tales that swirl around the inn seem to confirm its daunting presence. Chilling reports from those brave or foolhardy enough to spend a night within these ancient walls, including distressing experiences of being forcibly held down in bed, gripped by a terror that transcends the natural world. The fear is so tangible and intense it often leaves victims in a state of paralyzing dread, a sinister signature that seems to point irrefutably to the presence of the incubus. A multitude of theories have been postulated in an attempt to understand why such an entity would inhabit the Ancient Ram Inn. Some are convinced it was summoned into our plane of existence through the dark, secretive rituals performed by druids centuries ago. Others attribute its presence to the numerous violent and untimely deaths that have tarnished the inn's history, the remnants of their terror and anguish creating a beacon for the incubus. Whether the origin of this terrifying presence is rooted in forgotten pagan rituals or the echoes of past violence, one fact remains undeniable. This demon has transformed the Ancient Ram Inn into one of the most haunting and feared locations in Britain. A living testament to the supernatural, it draws the brave and the curious from all around the world, offering a chilling glimpse into the realms that lie beyond our understanding. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Monte Cristo Homestead. From the serene landscapes of England, our journey takes a detour to the southern hemisphere to the rugged terrains of Australia. Amidst the natural wonders of this continent, we unearth an unnerving destination, the Monte Cristo Homestead. Constructed in the Victorian era during the late 19th century, this manor is as exquisite as it is eerie, with a reputation that sends tremors of fear across the continent. In fact, the Monte Cristo Homestead is reputedly the most haunted house in all of Australia. But what imbues this seemingly serene house with such a chilling atmosphere? The answer lies in a terrifying, malevolent entity that seems to linger within its ancient walls. This demonic force, according to those who have encountered it, seems to draw its energy from the tragic past that befell the unfortunate Crawley family, the original inhabitants of the manor. Their lives were marked by a series of inexplicable tragedies, the echoes of which reverberate throughout the house to this day. This demon does not just passively exist within the homestead, instead it actively projects feelings of overwhelming despair and intense malice onto those who dare to step within its sphere of influence. This has led to a mounting number of unsettling reports from visitors and residents alike. Accounts include alarming apparitions appearing without warning, chilling echoes of cries that seem to emanate from unseen sources, and the inexplicable movement of objects that defy the laws of physics. Some have spoken of being watched by an invisible entity, feeling a menacing presence looming just out of sight. What makes the Monte Cristo Homestead a location of significant interest to paranormal enthusiasts worldwide is not just the presence of this demonic entity, but the alarming frequency and intensity of the encounters. Every creak in the floorboards, every whisper in the air, every fleeting shadow seems imbued with an otherworldly terror. This persistent, omnipresent sense of dread has etched the Monte Cristo Homestead deeply into the annals of haunted lore, making it a location that continues to unsettle even the bravest of hearts. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Chateau de Brissac. Leaving the rugged terrains of Australia, we embark on a journey across continents to the romantic heartland of France. Here, nestled amidst rolling vineyards, stands the regal Chateau de Brissac. At first glance, this 11th century castle captures the heart with its timeless elegance and architectural beauty, a testament to the opulence of the French aristocracy. However, behind its enchanting facade, it holds secrets that paint a hauntingly different picture. The true allure of the chateau for those drawn to the mysteries of the supernatural lies in its very grim past. The castle is haunted by a particularly terrifying apparition known as the Green Lady. Folklore suggests she is the ghost of a woman who met a tragic and treacherous end within these stone walls, betrayed and killed in a plot most foul. Visitors to the castle brave enough to explore its myriad of rooms often recount an eerie phenomenon. In the hushed stillness of the tower rooms, an ethereal green glow begins to manifest, growing in intensity before revealing the spectral form of the Green Lady. Her presence is often heralded by a bone-chilling moan that echoes through the ancient corridors, a lament from beyond the grave. What truly marks her as a demonic entity, however, are the terrifying details of her appearance. Her face, observers claim, features gaping dark holes in place of eyes and a grotesque visage that strays far from the norms of human ghosts and leans into the realm of the demonic. This unsettling description matches those of demons in many cultures, adding credence to the claims of her otherworldly nature. Though her primary haunt is the tower, her mournful wails reverberate through the entire castle, a spectral siren song that sends a chill down the spine of even the bravest adventurers. Whether it's the captivating architecture, the lavish interiors, or the hair-raising tales of the Green Lady, Chateau de Brissac promises a visit you will remember for a lifetime. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Potosi Mines. Setting sail from the haunted shores of France, we cross the Atlantic, navigating toward the vibrant yet mystic landscapes of South America. Our chilling expedition brings us to Bolivia, home to the infamous Potosi Mines. Known as one of the highest cities in the world, Potosi has a frightful reputation that far surpasses its impressive altitude. These mines have seen the rise and fall of empires, beginning with the Spanish conquest. Since then, they have witnessed a horrendous tally of human lives lost, an estimate that reaches a staggering 8 million souls. This grim history is not just a tale of human endurance and exploitation, but it's believed to have given birth to a malevolent presence known as El Tío. El Tío, or the Uncle, is a demonic entity believed to rule over the dark, oppressive underworld of the mines. He is no mere ghostly apparition, but a potent force that commands respect and fear in equal measure. Legend has it that he was born from the anguished cries of the countless miners who met their untimely demise within these gloomy shafts. Understanding the perilous power that El Tío holds, miners have adopted a unique practice. They make regular offerings to this demon, including cigarettes, cocoa leaves, and even splashes of strong liquor, in an attempt to appease him and prevent his wrath from falling upon them. This ritualistic respect paid to El Tío emphasizes the terror that his presence instills in the hearts of those who dare to enter his dominion. Yet, despite these attempts at appeasement, miners and visitors alike continue to report spine-chilling experiences within the depths of the mine. They speak of an overwhelming sensation of being watched by unseen eyes, a cold touch brushing against their skin in the pitch-black tunnels, and the unsettling sound of guttural growls echoing from the deep. These terrifying encounters, coupled with the historical atrocities that occurred within the Potosi Mines, have resulted in an undeniably haunted location. It stands as a stark reminder of the balance between our world and the supernatural, a boundary that, in places like these, seems perilously thin. And finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have Zunantunich. As we bid adieu to the haunting echoes of the Potosi Mines, we venture further into the heart of South America. Our next destination transports us to a place where the past and the present converge in a symphony of ancient wonders and spectral tales, the mesmerizing Zunantunich in Belize. Nestled deep within the verdant expanse of Belize's jungle, less than a mile from the Guatemalan border, this ancient Maya ruin stands as a testament to a civilization long lost in the annals of time. Having laid undisturbed for over 1,000 years, Zunantunich found its way back to the world's attention in the 1890s. Since its modern discovery, Zunantunich has taken on multiple roles. It has emerged as an essential hub for archaeologists seeking to unravel the mysteries of the past, a prized gem for tourists who are drawn to its undeniable allure, and perhaps most intriguingly, a hotspot for those interested by the supernatural. The haunting legend of Zunantunich revolves around the spectral figure of a woman known as the Stone Lady. With her flowing black hair and glowing red eyes that seem to pierce the veil of reality, she is a sight to chill the blood. It is said that she first made her spectral presence known to one of the first research teams to explore the ruins in 1893. Since her initial sighting, the Stone Lady has frequently been observed in the vicinity of the tallest building complex in the ruins, aptly named El Castillo. Her ghostly figure, bathed in ethereal moonlight, is a sight that has left an indelible impression on those fortunate, or unfortunate enough to cross her path. Despite the countless sightings and eerie tales, the exact origins of the Stone Lady remain shrouded in mystery. Given the extensive history of the site, theories about her identity are as numerous as they are fascinating. Many postulate that she might have been a part of a ritual sacrifice, a spiritual practice commonly performed by the ancient Maya civilization. Whether she is the restless spirit of a sacrificed soul or a guardian of these ancient ruins, the tale of the Stone Lady adds a very intriguing layer to the rich tapestry that is Zunantunich. As you traverse these hauntingly beautiful ruins, you might feel a pair of red eyes watching you from the shadows, reminding you of the mystic charm that continues to shroud this remarkable place.
In 5th place, we have Port Arthur. Port Arthur is a town and former convict settlement on the Tasman Peninsula in Tasmania, Australia. The site forms part of the Australian Convict Sites, a World Heritage Property consisting of 11 remaining penal sites originally built within the British Empire during the 18th and 19th centuries on Australian coastal strips. So collectively, these sites, including Port Arthur, are described by UNESCO as the best surviving examples of large-scale convict transportation and the colonial expansion of European powers through the presence and labor of convicts. From 1833 until 1877, Port Arthur was the destination for those deemed the most hardened of convicted British criminals, those who were secondary offenders having re-offended after their arrival in Australia. Rebellious personalities from other convict stations were also sent there. In addition, Port Arthur had some of the strictest security measures of the British penal system. So, as you can imagine, that would produce some pretty scary figures still kicking around with a grudge to hold. One popular figure who has been spotted frequently goes by the moniker of Reverend George. A tour coordinator for the settlement is adamant that photos have been captured of the spirit, usually near the parsonage, which is where he's believed to have passed some time in the 1870s. One of the more fearful spirits spotted on the grounds is named John Gould, a nasty convict who enjoys leering at unsuspecting visitors, often causing younglings to throw uncharacteristic tantrums and more. All in all, apparently there are more than 2,000 reports of unexplained activity, all bundled into 20 bulging files full of sightings of ghosts and strange emotional reactions to the buildings. In 4th place, we have the Adelaide Gaol. Thought to be one of the most haunted places in South Australia, the Adelaide Gaol is said to be regularly visited by some of the inmates and prison officers who once wandered its halls. First off, Frederick, otherwise known as Fred Carr, went the way of the rope necklace on the 12th of November of 1927 for the killing of his wife, Maud. He protested his innocence, even up until the final moments before his death, exclaiming that the law required his body, but it cannot have his soul, as he is innocent. Fred is said to regularly appear near the stairs leading to the upstairs cells of the new building. He is reported as a happy spirit, always neatly dressed in dark clothes and taking a polite interest in visitors wandering through his former home. Well, I'm glad one of the ghosties is chipper. Next up, we have William Baker Ashton, who was the first governor of the Adelaide Gaol, and despite being a reasonably fair man, he was accused of wrongdoing. William was a very large man, and when he died in his office in 1854, his body could not be manipulated down his apartment's steep, narrow staircase. Instead, he was unceremoniously lowered out of the front window to the undertaker's waiting below. 3 months after his death, William was exonerated, which was a little too late. On warm, still nights with a hint of thunder in the air, his footsteps are said to be heard through the walls of solid stone as he struggles to move furniture in an empty room. Finally, Ben Ellis was the hangman for 10 years, from the mid-1860s to mid-1870s, and lived in a small apartment below what became the female dormitory. Ben took pride in his work and approached each task with complete professionalism and never questioned the right or wrong of his profession until the 30th of December of 1873, when he was required to hang a female prisoner, Elizabeth Woolcock. She was to be the first and only woman executed in South Australia. So this event changed the way Ben viewed his profession forever, and his restless spirit is said to appear often throughout the residence. In 3rd place, we have the Monte Cristo Homestead. The 2-story Victorian manor was built by pioneer Christopher William Crawley in the New South Wales town of June in 1885 before his homestead became riddled with death and now claims to be the most haunted house in Australia. To be specific, a stable boy burned to death, a tiny human was thrown down the stairs, a maid was lobbed off a balcony, and a caretaker kaboomed to death, among others. Pardon me, I jumped straight to the good stuff without the history. Christopher Crawley first built the mansion in, 1885. 1985, where he lived with his wife Elizabeth, their 7 kiddos, and a series of servants. He was a wealthy farmer and landowner who had made his fortune in Junee, a small town in the Riverina region, after the Great Southern Railway line opened in 1878. With the success of his hotel and land sales, Christopher was able to retire early and began construction on his Monte Cristo homestead. This home was a status symbol for the Crawley family and a social hub for the town's most wealthy. Now, despite all the glamour, the Crawleys are said to have been holding on to many dark secrets and tragedies. Remember a moment ago when I mentioned that a young maid was said to have fallen to her death from the second-story balcony? Well, a bleach stain still remains where the scarlet life force was attempted to be removed, and footsteps can be heard pacing the top balcony in the middle of the night. Some even see the outline of a female figure on the balcony as well. The Crawleys themselves weren't immune from the, deathly Monte Cristo. Their youngest daughter, under a year old, died when her nanny accidentally dropped her down the stairs. Some claim it was on purpose, while others have ruled it as an accident. Feel free to let me know your theories in the comments. So the Monte Cristo homestead remained empty for over a decade after the last Crawley left in 1948. In 1963, Olive and Reginald Ryan purchased the now rundown manor for only about $1,000 Australian dollars. That's a bargain. Bone-chilling paranormal experiences were part of everyday life for the Ryan family, with Olive claiming to have had her name called out multiple times, only to find no one there. All of the offspring have also reported sightings of figures in old-fashioned clothes and have felt cold hands on their shoulders. Not the best place to grow up. In second place, we have the Airedale Mental Hospital. It's estimated that an astonishing 13,000 people passed away within the walls of the so-called Ararat Lunatic Asylum over its 140 years of operation, which made it perfect for today's list. So the now known Airedale Asylum was a psychiatric hospital in Ararat, a rural city in Victoria, Australia. So now considered a ghost town, the Airedale Asylum campus contains over 70 now abandoned buildings that once housed over 1,000 patients. As with many asylums of the time, it was meant to be self-sufficient and provide the patients, or inmates as they were referred to at the time, with labor that was believed to help in their treatments. Despite its closure as an asylum in 1993, the facility was used to house female prisoners during the renovation of the Dame Phyllis Frost Center. Now, while reports exist of apparitions, phantom sounds, visitors experiencing nausea, fainting, and pain, some ghosts from Airedale's past have made themselves known to those who are alive today. George Fittimont was the last governor, so in 1886, he was showing a group of people around the asylum when they started down a set of stairs. Suddenly, George fell to his knees, suffering a major heart attack, and passed on the spot. These days, tour guides and visitors hear heavy footsteps and banging on that same stairwell, but when they go to take a look, no one's there. Gary Webb was a career criminal and had a long rap sheet when he was finally taken into custody and sent to stay at Airedale. Gary got comfortable there and started to write letters to the media, telling them the inhuman and horrible things he was planning to do once he got out. Citizens began to worry, and a special law was passed to keep him contained there for the rest of his life. He began to self-mutilate at this time and was hospitalized over 70 times. He even castrated himself 3 times during his sentence. So today, Gary is said to haunt his former room, screaming at visitors to get out and pushing them out the door. Visitors to the hospital who happen to walk past the office of the former superintendent report a sudden bitter taste in their mouth. Would you like to know why? Of course you do. The superintendent ended his life in his office after swallowing cyanide. The rest of the women's ward is haunted by a ghost named Nurse Carrie. She is said to watch over the tour guides. Her apparition, as well as others, have been seen in the women's ward donning old-time nurses' uniforms and disappearing into stone walls. Other folks report a tingling sensation in their head when they enter what used to be the shock therapy room. In the J ward in particular, visitors report feeling ill and suddenly afraid. Others slip into a trance, only released from it when they exit the building. Some people have even been bitten or pushed while walking through the J ward. The ward is also said to, be haunted by 3 prisoners who went the way of the rope necklace and buried on the property. They are said to be restless because they weren't given a proper burial, and their graves are only marked with 3 scratches on the prison wall. Could somebody fix it and give them a proper burial? Please? In first place, we have the entire town of Picton, New South Wales. So according to my research, it's the most haunted town in Australia. But Picton is also known for its countryside views and paranormal gardens. The town is located about 80 kilometers southwest of Sydney and has a historical significance due to its buildings and railway tunnels. The Mushroom Tunnel, also known as the former Red Bank Range Railway, is our main focus for today. There are famous tales of ghosts drifting around the tunnel, with the most popular being linked with a terrible railway accident involving a woman named Emily Ballard. discovered. Apparently, when the tunnel was still in use by the railway, Emily had been walking through it and was killed by an oncoming locomotive. It is unclear whether she deliberately ended her life or if her death was just an unfortunate accident. Reports suggest people often witness Emily and 2 other women ghosts and also hear some scary voices. You know, just some cryings and shrieks. No biggie. The apparition of Emily has been seen in the depths of the tunnel and is described as a white flowing figure of a woman with no face. Many people have also reported a sudden drop of temperature, eerie shadows, gusts of wind, orbs, body chills, and many weird other things happening inside the tunnel. The tunnel was apparently used to store mustard gas, spray tanks, and ammunition during World War II. It was also used as a mushroom farm, ergo the mushroom moniker amongst locals. From time to time, black shadows or figures have been seen on walls throughout the tunnel. Some witnesses have reported white lights hovering above people's heads and figures appearing out of the darkness. Ghostly younglings have been witnessed and electrical disturbances have occurred to devices in the tunnel. People have also felt, sudden drops in temperature. Oh, almost forgot, there is a ghost train hunting the tunnel, because human spirits aren't enough. During a tour group experience, one witness recounted that when they reached the tunnel, he said the entire group noticed a random light in the distance and the sound of a steam train overwhelming the area. He said that everyone, including the tour guide, scrambled to hug the walls. And now remember, this tunnel has been inactive for almost 50 years at this time. The witness claims he felt the wind on his face as he closed his eyes and the train passed. Want to hear about a ghostie haunting the cemetery near the tunnel? Of course you do. Blanche Moon was a youngling who died in 1886 and haunts the cemetery. She was the daughter of Henry and Fanny Moon, and her father is believed to have been the timber worker who helped make the railway sleepers she fell off of while playing, which is the fall that led to her death. In January of 2010, a family visiting St. Mark's Cemetery snapped a photo apparently showing the ghosts of 2 younglings who died almost 60 years apart. And yep, you guessed it, one of them is believed to be Blanche Moon herself. The family claimed that there were no young people in the cemetery at the time the photo was taken, and that the figures of the 2 were only noticed when the pictures were downloaded to a computer. Other places in Picton rumored to be haunted are the Imperial Hotel, where many staff report the feeling of someone following them through several parts of the building, and at times, the jukebox begins to play, even though it's not connected to power. Wallandilly Shire Hall, which is reported to be haunted by 3 ghosts, including a bearded man wearing a hat and suit, a small mischievous boy, and a little girl, who is most often heard rather than seen. Stone Quarry Viaduct, where over the years many people have drowned in the creek. Locals have heard ghoulish sounds of people swimming and splashing in said creek. And finally, Emmett Cottages, where the ghost of a woman is seen in the window of the building, and shop owners often find their displays have been moved overnight.
Number 5 is Slaughterhouse Canyon. Slaughterhouse Canyon is home to one of the most tragic stories I have ever heard. In the early 1800s, a family lived remotely in this area. There were 4 of them. The mother, the father, and 2 children. The father would travel into this canyon and have to leave his family for extended periods of time. These trips were for food, money, clothes, anything to assist his family's survival. One day during his journey, he was lost to the rocks and did not return. Without the assistance from the father, the remainder of the family started to starve. Slowly dying of famine and having no resources, the family, and most specifically the mother, lost her mind. Her madness reached a state that she could no longer come back from, and the incessant bawling of her children for food became too loud in her mind to bear. Dressing herself in her wedding gown, she walked her children to a nearby river and threw them in it to let them drown in the water. Realizing what she had done, her cries filled and echoed throughout the canyon until not long after, she finally perished to starvation herself. It is said that this canyon is still haunted by her undead spirit, that anyone who sets foot on these grounds will hear the shrieks that echoed throughout the canyon centuries earlier, and that extended exposure to this area will cause one to lose their mind exactly how the mother did. Many people report having extreme anxiety when in this area and a deep desire to leave. Perhaps that is the mother spirit attempting to warn people of this canyon so no one suffers the same fate that her family did. Regardless of her intentions though, it's safe to say that Slaughterhouse Canyon is deeply haunted. Number 4 is the Devil's Tramping Grounds. This is in reference to a very strange patch of soil in North Carolina. For decades, this circle of dirt has allowed nothing to grow on it, whilst the area surrounding it is home to luscious wildlife. Now there could be any number of reasons for why nothing is growing on this patch of dirt. Simply because an area of land cannot grow wildlife does not automatically mean the devil himself has anything to do with it. However, for this particular spot of land, that just might be the case. Locals have reported putting objects in the center of the circle and coming back a day later to find their items placed right outside of it. There have also been several sightings of deep red glowing eyes in the night. It's widely believed that this specific circle is used by the devil to dance at night, or in some cases, to perform graphic and gruesome rituals. Therefore, if anything is inside his circle, he will move it to the outside. A daring reporter decided to test this theory one evening and slept in that exact spot in a tent. He said that the entire evening he heard the distinct sounds of dancing footprints outside his tent, but couldn't spot anything when he looked outside. Whether it's the devil or a strange phantom creature performing strange phantom rituals, it's clear that something is not right with this dead patch of dirt. Number 3 on this list is Hoia Forest in Romania. This forest has been regarded by many as potentially the scariest and most dangerous forest on the entire planet. Unlike your typical haunted house that may be haunted by a singular ghost, this forest has a plethora of creatures to watch out for. Ghosts, apparitions, dark shadowy beings, and demons have all been sighted in this forest, with one person even stating that they've seen a UFO before. The general note that almost everyone leaves with is this strange feeling of being watched and a strong sense of anxiety. This has been taken to the extreme on several occasions though. One story I came across detailed a man who lost his mind and swore that he had a run-in with a demon or the devil. Another one describes how campers consistently heard the stomping of horses right outside their tent, but when they went to check outside, nothing was there. There was also a tale of how 2 people went into the forest and overnight, one of them became fascinated with death. So fascinated that he became incredibly morbid and could only speak about death and how he wanted to watch people die. This forest started out as local Romanian folklore, but over the years has garnered some serious attention. The general consensus though is to stay away. Number 2 on our list is the haunted waters of Utah Lake. Utah Lake is a massive body of water that spans 150 square miles. Whilst it's undoubtedly home to a deluge of underwater critters, some of them don't come naturally. On the shores of Utah Lake are a collection of rocks, aptly named the Massacre Rocks. It's said that hundreds of years ago, the area surrounding Utah Lake was occupied by Native Americans. During that period, there was a great famine that was affecting the people in this group. Therefore, mothers of newborn children, rather than subject their child to a life of harsh starvation where they would likely die anyways, were forced by the community to drown these babies in the water of Utah Lake by the Massacre Rocks. It was through this tragedy that Utah Lake became haunted. Many locals of the area believe that the souls of these children still rest at the bottom of this lake to this day. It is undecided whether or not these souls have taken a physical and amphibious form or if they are simply ghostly apparitions. One thing is for certain though, do not go in the water. Approaching the lake, you will start to hear the cries of young children coming from the water. You must fight the urge to go and help that cry. These children, or water babies as they are often referred to, will drag you to the depths of the lake and you will never be seen again. Number 1 on this list is Airedale Asylum, located in Australia. The Airedale Insane Asylum was a mental institute that housed some of Australia's most dangerous criminals for over 100 years. It's said that many deaths occurred in this asylum, averaging roughly 100 per year. Now, it doesn't house any mental patients today, but it is thought that the spirits of these patients are still there. Visitors of the Airedale Insane Asylum often have to leave soon after they've entered due to fainting or feeling unexplained pain or serious nausea. One of the most common things people note is the sound of repeated banging. The sound of somebody smacking their head against the wall rings throughout the asylum, with no one being able to find the origin of it. Some people have reported actually being shoved or bitten with no one in sight. There are also several rooms of this asylum with special characteristics to them. Gary Webb was a longtime patient of this asylum, known to be particularly gruesome. He died a long time ago. However, if you were to tread inside his room, you would still hear the distinctive shout to get out. The former superintendent's office is a place of particular interest as well, since it will give people passing by the unmistakable taste of bitter acid, which is only too fitting considering the superintendent committed suicide by drinking acid many years earlier. This asylum has seen some horrible atrocities in it amongst its walls, and it's clear that some of them will be locked in there forever.
Coming in at number 5, we have Ozone Disco. What a name, I kinda wanna go. In March of 1996, a tragic accident happened in Q-Zone City's Ozone Disco. The local universities had just done their yearly graduation ceremonies. The students were looking to celebrate, and there was a party being thrown for them at the disco. There were around 350 guests attending that night, even though the building had only been cleared to safely hold 35 people. Due to the large amount of people in such a small place, when the fire broke out, they did not stand much chance of escape. Tragically, around 200 people did not make it out that night. Not only did the fire consume the lives of many, but others were trampled in the chaos of trying to escape. The one fire exit the building had been blocked by the building next door, meaning the large amount of people who fled to it to escape became trapped. It was reported that when entering the building to look for survivors, the bodies were piled up waist high. Survivors of the fire explained how around midnight sparks started flying from the DJ booths shortly after smoke appeared. Partygoers thought it was part of the experience, that it was all pyrotechnics to mark the new day. This meant that many did not flee as soon as they should have. All of this combined into a huge tragedy that claimed the lives of so many who were just about to start their lives. Since the incident, the club has been closed and abandoned. However, those who are around the club at night have witnessed some paranormal activity. Some have heard music coming from the club's doors or seen disco lights from a distance. You might think these are just kids who have snuck into party, but others have heard disturbing screams for help, but as they got closer to investigate, the screams fade away. There is a clear warning to those who might try to visit the place today that it's not safe. You might meet a paranormal spirit angry from the tragedy, or you might have a dangerous accident of your own. Coming in at number 4, we have Malacañang Palace. Malacañang Palace is the White House of the Philippines. It is the official residence and principal workplace for the President of the Philippines. It was originally built in 1750, so it has a long history, making it perfect for some paranormal happenings. The building has been home to many important people, but has also been a part of revolutions within the country, leading to many tragic passings on the property. In particular, there is one story that during one of the revolts by the people, they stormed and seized the home. They found one presidential worker who is now unknown and made their own justice. Although this is not a confirmed story, it is often told to explain one of the paranormal guests who has been pictured outside of the home. They have been named the Headless Ghost. The photo captured shows the outside of the palace with a headless figure facing the camera. It is thought that this poor soul was separated with his head before passing and now walks the halls searching for it. He is not the only ghost that has been spotted on the premises though. There have been sightings of former presidents, such as Manuel Quezon and Manuel Roxas. There is also a report where Governor Amy Marcos, daughter of Ferdinand Marcos, actually saw Quezon's ghost at one point during her father's presidency. I guess when you dedicate your life to serving as president, it is hard to let go of the place you call home. If you were to visit, maybe keep your camera handy. You never know who you might just see. Coming in at number 3, we have Clark Air Base Hospital. Clark Air Base Hospital was used during World War II and the Vietnam War. It now lays abandoned on a redeveloped Air Force base. It is said that as soon as you enter the destroyed building, you instantly feel the paranormal energy that belongs there. The locals believe it to be cursed and dare not enter. Due to this, it is seen as the most haunted hospital in the country. The hospital has been ravaged by time, most parts overgrown with greenery, with others simply falling apart. The hospital today does still attract ghost hunters. Due to the amount of pain and suffering that occurred during its time, there are plenty of lost spirits trapped. A number of visitors have reported hearing voices echo through the empty halls of the hospital. Some hear screams. It is said that the voices of those trapped are of the soldiers who lost their lives in the war. It seems they feel they have unfinished business in the world. Many would have left behind their families to serve their country. These are not the only patients still staying there though. The first floor ward was home to the hospital's pediatric center. People have heard the screams of newborn babies and children laughing. One security guard even heard the running footsteps of what sounded like a child. This entity ran straight past him one night while on patrol. He has since refused to patrol within the hospital walls. The hotel did still operate after the war until a nearby volcano erupted, covering the hospital in ash. This was taken as a sign by the locals that nature was warning them to stay away. There are also those who ignore the warnings and venture inside. Just be warned, it seems to have a habit of causing tragedy. Coming in at number 2, we have Laperle House. The Laperle House was built by Roberto Laperle in the 1930s. During World War II, the house was used by Japanese soldiers. They were reportedly a nasty group of brutes. They attacked local women, tortured suspected ties, and even ended their life once they received any information that they had. The house is said to have seen many horrors due to all of this, and the home was never the same after the soldiers left. Those who had been there within this time warned others to stay away. The house transferred ownership after the death of the head of the Laperal clan. They attempted to maintain the home, but the years and horrors do show on the home's old exterior. The house has withstood much more than those around it, both man-made and natural disasters. To everyone's surprise, the house was still standing after the deadly earthquake of 1990. In 2013, the home was turned into a museum. It was at this point that we started to hear more details about the hauntings inside. The show has been visited on many ghost haunting shows, along with being featured in a film. Those who have visited the house have told of what they found and why the house is visited often by paranormal investigators. One visitor claimed that they heard screams coming from the lower sections of the home. They rushed to go see if someone was hurt, but they found nothing. As they read more about the home, they believe this could have been linked to where the torture happened during the war. Others felt a dark presence in various sections of the home, cold spots or a feeling of sadness that disappeared as quickly as they had felt it. Some said they felt watched, like there is an entity in the home that no one can see, but it is watching all who visit closely. One man claimed he heard water running in the rooms, but when he went to turn it off, there was nothing there. Not even a source for any water to be coming from. The home is haunted by the ghosts of the past, but might also hold an ancient entity that causes you to feel watched. Either way, this is not a home I'll be visiting anytime soon. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have Manghit Cave. Manghit Cave got its name from the smell of the accumulated bat droppings inside the cave. Located in the central Philippines, this is a scary location due to more than the hauntings. Many people are scared of entering dark and possibly unstable caves, but this one contains more than just the fear of confined spaces. The cave is popular by those who like to explore deep into caves in their spare time, but do it at your own risk. The cave is said to be haunted by lost caving groups. The cave does not offer much light, and the deeper you go, the more lost you get. There have been a number of groups that have gotten lost throughout the years with no remains ever recovered. There are so many hidden corners within its maze you will never be found. Those who explore it today have encountered a number of paranormal occurrences. Some report seeing shadows not cast by them or their group, like there is someone else with them. Others have heard footsteps scrambling around as if in panic. Finally, the further in you travel, the more you hear a distant scream of help. Often only one of 2 members of your team will hear this. No matter how far towards the voice you go, it will keep seeming out of reach. This causes people to go further and further into the caving system until their team bring them to their senses to head back. Those who have experienced this believe it may be how the others have gone missing. Some say there may be a demon living deep within the cave looking to bring the lost souls to feast on.
Number 5 on this list is the Myrtles Plantation. The Myrtles Plantation is located in St. Francisville, Louisiana, and is home to a plethora of ghosts. The plantation was established in 1796 and is said to have been built on an ancient burial grounds. These burial grounds have obviously contributed to the deep spiritual presence that it has, and the reports that there are 12 different ghosts that currently occupy the space. However, the spirit that is most commonly seen wandering the place wasn't from these burial grounds at all, but an incident that occurred at the plantation many years ago. Chloe, a slave of the plantation in the early 1800s, was eavesdropping one day on a conversation between the family who owned the plantation. The punishment was swift and drastic, and they cut off one of Chloe's ears so that she would never do it again. Chloe obviously didn't take too kindly to this, and even though she knew it would most likely mean her death, wanted to retaliate. She did so by poisoning a birthday cake, which in turn killed 2 of the owner's daughters. For this, she was put to death and executed. However, it is said that Chloe's spirit still wanders the ground to this day and is the most commonly spotted ghost at this plantation. She will be wearing a turban to cover up her ear that was chopped off when she was alive. If you ever see this ghost, people say that you immediately get filled with a deep and solemn depression that hangs over you for quite some time. People speculate that the deep depression that you feel after encountering her may have been the way that she felt while she was alive. Number 4 on this list is the Whaley House. The Whaley House is located in San Diego, California, and is said by some to be the most haunted home in all of the United States. The ghost who haunts the home is not your standard phantom. In fact, it is the spirit of a convicted high-profile robber from the 1850s.
Yankee Jim had a good run of thievery, but was inevitably unable to avoid the gallows and was hung off of the back of a wagon in 1852. Thomas Whaley was at that hanging and watched as Yankee Jim died. This did not deter him though from purchasing the very land where it happened. It was at this spot that he proceeded to build what is known today as the Whaley House. It didn't take very long at this home though before the Whaleys quickly realized the errors of their ways. It is said that it took only a few weeks of living there before they started to notice strange ongoings at the home. Doors would slam without anyone around them at all. They may even lock themselves as well with you inside. Footsteps could be heard moving around the home at all hours throughout the day. These footsteps were large, the sound of a big boot attacking the ground, the sound of Yankee Jim. In the entirety of that time the family owned the home for over 100 years, there was never a time that they said they weren't haunted in this house. After the home was donated and turned into a museum, the sightings became more exaggerated. Different phantoms started appearing, screams were heard, items would float from place to place. A parapsychologist even reported seeing a phantom dog run through the home at one point. Frankly, I don't believe all of these secondary claims. It kind of feels like people's imaginations ran with the idea of having a haunting once it turned into a museum. But I do believe the ghost of Yankee Jim to be a very real thing. If you do go to this home, make sure you have no valuables with you, or Yankee Jim may just claim them for himself. Number 3 on this list is Bachelor's Grove Cemetery. We just spoke about the most haunted home in America, so it's only fitting that we talk about the most haunted cemetery in America. The Bachelor's Grove Cemetery is located in Chicago, Illinois, and has potentially the widest array of ghost stories that I've ever heard of. It's not the biggest graveyard in the world. In fact, it doesn't even operate as one anymore. It was established in the 1840s and practically abandoned in the mid-1900s. There were rumors that the mafia used to use this place as a spot to dump bodies, as it's reasonably secluded and nobody could see them do it. Its secluded nature, rumors tied to the mafia, and the inevitable vandalism that it did receive could all be reasons why it's haunted today. Now, I was talking about the mafia and gangsters. Well, one of the biggest ghostly sightings at this cemetery is actually a gangster car. The graveyard is right next to a road, and people driving down that road have reported seeing the distinct image of a vehicle in the middle of the road resembling a mafia vehicle. People have actually fully swerved off of the road and crashed their own cars, and then later realized that nothing was there at all. Others have seen a whole farmhouse appear in the graveyard, but when they tried to go to it, it completely disappeared. Cars and farmhouses, these are big apparitions, and lead me to believe that the spiritual presence in this cemetery has got to be really strong. In 1991, the Chicago Sun released a very famous picture of the graveyard in which there appears to be the figure of a woman sitting on a gravestone, all in white. The photographer behind this picture claims that there wasn't anybody there when he took the picture, and it only came up on the camera. With over 100 ghostly sightings in this cemetery, I do believe that its claim to be the most haunted cemetery in America, it's well earned. Number 2 on this list is Waverly Hills Sanatorium. Waverly Hills Sanatorium is located in Louisville, Kentucky, and was home to thousands of deaths. At least 8,000 if we're really trying to be exact. The sanatorium was built in 1910, and the main patients that it dealt with were victims of the White Plague. Back then, there was no known cure, and many of the patients died to this disease. That wasn't the only way that they died here though. It is believed that doctors would use these dying patients as guinea pigs for some drugs or treatments that they were developing. However, oftentimes this would just result in the patient's death. After the White Plague had largely been dealt with, the space was transformed into a geriatric hospital. The liberties that the doctors and the nurses took, they got even worse when this happened. Electroshock therapy was utilized. Major injustices and mistreatments were done on the patients from the nurses. It really all went bad. In the 1980s, this spot was shut down for good, but by that point, the damage had already been done. Now Waverly Hills is one of the most haunted locations in America. People say that there are constant footsteps all over the place, even though there's hardly anyone in the building. Doors will slam and lock when no one's even close to them. Phantoms and shadows will stalk people throughout the hallways of the building, seemingly waiting for a moment to strike. Screams and shrieks of former patients can be heard ringing throughout the corridors of the building. Many ghosts haunt the death tunnel, which was a place where they used to move the bodies of the dead. In room 502, there have been reported attacks on people where they have felt their bodies seize up and get thrown to the ground. In that room, 2 nurses committed suicide. Apparently one of them jumped out of the window and the other one hung themselves because they couldn't live with the ongoing death that happened in this place. This building has seen way too many horrible things in its existence to just be a building anymore. Feel free to look it up on the internet if you're interested, but don't go visit this in person. Number 1 on this list is the Eastern State Penitentiary. This prison is located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and when you hear the types of things that went on at this place, it's no wonder that it's haunted as badly as it is. The facility was built in 1829 and was in service for roughly 150 years. Now, if this place had a motto, then it would have to be something about solitude. That was the theme at Eastern State Penitentiary: being alone. If you were a prisoner there, then you had your very own tiny little cell where you lived alone, ate alone, slept alone, and just existed alone. The thing is, it wasn't just the cell either. If you had to go to the washroom or leave the cell for any reason, then the guards would put a bag over your head and they would walk you to wherever you're going. The only thing that you will ever know if you go to this place is your cell. The mental strain that that amount of solitude would have had on those prisoners, it would have been insane. This wasn't the only form of punishment though. There were reports of chaining your tongue to your wrist and leaving you like that. They would dunk you in water and then they would hang you outside in the winter until your body literally froze. And honestly, there was a lot more horrible things that they did too that I don't even want to get into. Either way, due to all the horrors, due to all the death, due to all the atrocities that went on in these walls, the prison now boasts its fair share of ghosts. It is currently open to the public, however, I would not recommend going and checking it out. They have various cell blocks that are all known for different ghostly experiences. One of them has extreme echoing voices of laughter as if somebody was going insane. One of them has what it feels like evil shadowy figures jumping from wall to wall. The bloodthirst that these figures have is reportedly palpable. Another cell block has the visions of the dead faces that appear battered and bloodied right in front of you. Gary Johnson, who works to upkeep the prison, had a harrowing experience here before. He was opening up a cell block to clean it when all of a sudden his body stopped functioning, and he was completely paralyzed, but also totally aware. He felt as if spirits were invading his body and hurting his mind as he was frozen. Finally, he was released and ran from the scene. This prison is haunted to its core, and it must be avoided at all costs. Number 5 on this list is Tranquil Sanatorium in British Columbia. Tranquil Sanatorium has quite an extensive and tragic history to it, which has caused its walls to be the home to many undead spirits. A sanatorium, if you weren't familiar, is an establishment which has the sole purpose of housing those with long-term illnesses and is often associated with tuberculosis. The one that we're talking about right now is no different. It was built in 1907 as a facility to treat people with tuberculosis. However, it didn't stay like this for very long. The purpose of the facility eventually changed to become an insane asylum. It acted as this mental institute for a while until finally becoming abandoned in the late 1980s. Due to its deep history with death, disease, mental illness, it's no wonder that the Tranquil Sanatorium is now deeply haunted. The layout of this facility screams something out of a Stephen King book. It has several buildings that are connected by poorly lit underground tunnels. The building itself looks all too eerie from the outside as well, with dirty cream colored walls that have seen far better days as rot and mold slowly devour them. Visitors of this place report feeling extremely uneasy. A common note for most people that visit is the presence of orbs, strange balls of light that flutter throughout the building and then disappear. Some people have reported seeing a ghostly apparition on the 6th floor. This ghost takes the form of a woman not older than 30. She appears to be crying and screaming. The tunnels are said to be particularly haunted. People have reported screams coming from nowhere, flashes of movement, menacing and animalistic groans that make you feel as if somebody is right behind you. Children can also be heard playing every now and again in some of the more open areas of the building. Clearly, this place's dark history has impacted it greatly, and just because physical humans decided to abandon it in the 80s doesn't mean that it was truly abandoned for good. Number 4 on this list is the Firkins House. The Firkins House is part of Fort Edmonton Edmonton Park, which, you guessed it, is located in Edmonton, Alberta. Fort Edmonton Park is a little tourist attraction that has buildings from 1885, 1905, and 1920 to represent the homes of the time. One of the houses is the Firkins House. This home is interesting because during my research, I couldn't find any particular evidence of wrongdoings or tragic events at this home. In fact, for the most part, it seems like a pretty normal house. People have lived there before and no harm has befell them, but it seems that after they moved out and the home was donated, that's when things started to go a little bit haywire. There are reportedly 3 ghosts or demons that haunt this home, each one scarier and more dangerous than the next. The first one is the ghost of a beautiful floating woman who is dressed in all white. People have said that they've spotted her in the windows of the home looking out at them or slowly drifting throughout the living room. The second one is the ghost of a little boy. The boy will appear to certain people looking extremely ill. It is currently unknown if this boy died in and around the area or what disease he is suffering from, but it is said that he resides in the home with the woman in white. The third being is by far the scariest of all 3. A ventriloquist dummy that will appear in the home or in the cupboards. This thing can move all by itself and talk by itself. It is very similar to the popular horror franchise Chucky, and it's said by some to be seeking to harm the living. I'm not sure if the ghost of the ventriloquist has taken over this dummy or if the dummy has taken on its own persona, but I definitely do not want to go anywhere where the primary residence is a demon puppet. Number 3 on this list is the 5 Fishermen Restaurant. This is a restaurant in Halifax, Nova Scotia, known for its exceptional oysters and also its ghostly inhabitants. The ground that this restaurant sits on wasn't always utilized for serving up fish and chips though. In fact, it has a very long history. In the early 1800s is when the building went up, and for a long time it acted as the town's only school. Nothing ghoulish or demonic about that. However, at around the turn of the century, the school moved and the building took on a new purpose. It became the mortuary for Halifax and made its dealings with the dead. Now, not every mortuary is going to become haunted, but this one had quite a lot to deal with over the years. In 1912, the unsinkable ship, the Titanic, sunk. It sunk roughly 640 kilometers off of the eastern shores of Canada, and therefore the closest places to assist with the rescue was these eastern provinces. Halifax acted as the leader in these rescue processes, and because of that, the mortuary had an onslaught of bodies of people whom had died on the ship. 5 years after that tragedy, Halifax incurred one of their own with the massive Halifax explosion. This was where a munitions ship exploded and it killed roughly 2,000 people just like that. This mortuary served as the primary designation for both of these incidents, and due to the unnatural deaths here, it makes sense that some spirits have clung on. Guests and employees alike have reported seeing ghosts all over this mortuary that turned restaurant. One of the dishwashers reported running out of the restaurant when he looked up from what he was doing and was staring directly at a ghost-like specter. The restaurant has attempted to have serious renovations done. However, I don't think that any amount of structural changes will get these spirits to rest for good. Number 2 on this list is the Frank Slide. Now, even though the Frank Slide sounds like it could be a fun, popular dance move that takes over TikTok for a few weeks, it is far more morbid than that. On April 29th in 1903, in the mining town of Frank, which at that time was part of the Northwest Territories but is now a section of Alberta, there was a horrible tragedy. 110 million tons of limestone and rock came tumbling down in one of Canada's biggest landslides ever. This fell onto part of the town of Frank. Frank was located right next to Turtle Mountain, which after extensive mining had grown unstable. On April 29th, it all came crashing down and claimed the lives of 70 to 90 people. It is still to this day Canada's most deadly landslide to ever occur in history, and was a horrible tragedy that can only remind us how fleeting life can be. I think the craziest part about this landslide as well is that it wasn't just miners who were killed. Their wives, their families, all of them died at the hands of the Frank Slide. The remains of these bodies were never recovered either, as the damage from the slide was far too devastating. Where all of this happened is now a section of a town called Crow's Nest Pass, and over a century later, the ghosts of the dead still haunt the area. This place is somewhere where visitors have reported feeling very unsafe. They say that the overall feelings of uneasiness are almost too much to bear and that they have to leave. Cries, howls, screams. This can all be heard late at night as you're trying to sleep. Lanterns will be seen in the night walking around at the hands of unknown apparitions. It is basically a full ghost town of people who never deserved to die in the first place, all wanting to get a second just to feel their lives again as they were so unfairly ripped away from them. Definitely one of Canada's most horrific tragedies, and now home to one of its most haunted locations. Number 1 on this list is the Banff Springs Hotel. This hotel is located in Banff, Alberta, and is truly one of the creepiest places that I've ever read about. Now, first off, I want to note the hotel itself looks gorgeous on the outside. The beautiful nature it is surrounded by is stunning, and the hotel gives me some serious Harry Potter Hogwarts vibes. However, when I say that this place is surrounded by nature, I really mean it. It is totally out on its own, with no other buildings in sight at all. The secluded site has been around for 132 years and has housed its fair share of visitors. Some of these visitors have had some incredible stays. I mean, when you look it up online, the hotel has a 4.7 Google rating, so I mean, it's pretty freaking good. Some of the guests, though, they never checked out. In the 1920s, a couple was set to have their wedding at this hotel. On the day of the ceremony, though, the bride, while she was walking down one of the hotel's beautiful marble staircases, tripped and fell, smacking her head on her descent and dying on the spot. This bride's spirit is one of the most notable sightings people have had when they're staying at this hotel. It's said that they often see a phantom in a wedding dress ascending and descending the stairs very quickly. She's also been seen in the ballroom dancing alone, potentially dreaming of the dance that she wanted so desperately to have with the husband that she never got to marry. In 1975, a longtime bellman of the hotel, Sam, died there. Since then, sightings of Sam have been pretty consistent. One story details how 2 women lost their room key and called the front desk to go and get it. The front desk person sent someone to go and open their room for these ladies. When that person had got there, though, the ladies were already in the room and said that another bellman had let them in. They described Sam to a T when they spoke about the bellman who helped them out. Instances like this have occurred time and time again at the hotel, with many people believing his spirit is still working there. Finally, with this hotel, you have room 873. Room 873 is rumored to be the home of a gruesome murder. One evening, a family was staying there, and the father, for some unknown reason, lost his mind, murdering his family and himself. After completely refurbishing the room, the hotel put it back in service, but now people who have stayed there report hearing the screams and the cries as if they were still dying. If you have to stay at this hotel, definitely avoid room 873.
Number 5 on this list is the Island of Dolls. This place has got to be one of the creepiest spots on the entire planet, if you ask me. Located in the canals near Mexico City, the Island of Dolls got its name from the residents that live in the trees. If you hadn't guessed already, those residents are creepy looking dolls. They weren't the only ones living here in the past, though. The haunting of this island is deeply tied with a man named Don Julian Santana Barrera. In the mid-20th century, Don Julian was living with his wife and children in Mexico City. However, for reasons unknown to us, he decided to leave his family and isolate himself on an island in Texulo Lake. He was completely alone on this island until he made a chilling discovery. The body of a young girl had washed ashore, and it was clear that she had drowned in this lake far earlier. This shook Don Julian to his core, and his already fragile mind was tested even more. Now, it's rumored that he believed the spirit of this girl was talking to him, that her ghost was haunting the island, and that she had a mission for him to accomplish. So when a doll floated through the lake and found its way onto the island a little bit after her body had been found, it fit into this narrative perfectly. Don Julian believed that the ghost of this girl could only be appeased if he took this doll and hung it from a tree on his island. He went and did this, but then his obsession for these dolls grew. Whether he was truly being haunted by this ghostly spirit or his mind had deteriorated to a point of no return is unknown, but we do know that he dedicated the next 50 years of his life to filling this island with dolls. Dolls that he found in the canals, in the garbage on the streets. Sometimes they were missing limbs or there was only a head left of them, but it didn't matter to Don Julian. He would still hang them regardless. Nowadays, the island is filled with thousands of dolls who look like they've seen far better days. What caps this story off and made its legend ripple through Mexican lore is the manner in which our island keeper died. Drowning in Texulo Lake exactly how the young girl had done so 50 years earlier. Today, it is believed that his spirit, along with the young girls, remain on this island. Locals say if you were to visit this place, you must bring a doll of your own, or else the spirit of Don Julian will haunt you even after you leave. Number 4 on this list is the House of Mummies. The House of Mummies is a small museum that is home to a plethora of mummies. What makes this place so interesting is that no one intended for these bodies to be mummified. Guanajuato, where this museum is located, has a very unique climate and soil. In 1833, that region was going through a bad outbreak of disease and there were a lot of deaths. Some of the bodies that were buried during this time were later found to have been naturally mummified or had mummified themselves. People were fascinated and took them to a specific building, which later has been transformed into a museum. Now, there's a lot of lore surrounding these bodies, but the general consensus is that there is still a bit of life to these mummies. People have reported feeling their living presence when they go and visit this museum. They've also said that they have felt them watching them as they go through, or have noticed their bodies turn to look at them. It truly sounds like something straight out of a Scooby-Doo book, but then again, so does natural mummification. Locals even say that they believe some of the mummies sneak out of this museum sometimes and cause trouble in the night when nobody's looking. Number 3 on this list is Claudia Mirangro's house. Claudia was a woman with a decently easy life who had inherited a reasonable amount of money from her parents' passing. When she was younger, she got married, and she and her husband bought a home in the city of Querétaro. It was at this residence that they had their 3 children. Alfredo was the youngest, Anna was the middle child, and Claudia, named after her mother, was the eldest. Apparently, the family had some happy years living there, but that didn't last forever. Claudia Mirangro's mental state started to decline and she went down a bit of a rabbit hole. It got to a point where her husband could no longer stand his wife and he left her and the kids. Poor idea to leave the children in the hands of this woman though. On April 24th, 1989, the voices in her head got far too loud. She was convinced that she was possessed by a demon and that everyone in the city that they were living had turned into spirits. Her madness reached a point of no return, and as the voices beckoned her to do so, she grabbed a knife and went into her children's room, killing them one by one. Hours later, the police were called due to somebody reporting heavy crying. They found the mother covered in blood, mumbling to herself, clutching a bloody knife on the floor. She apparently doesn't remember the incident at all and wholeheartedly believes that a demon was controlling her actions. Claudia went to jail for a long time and is still there to this day, but her children's spirits, they didn't go anywhere. People have reported hearing screams and shrieks coming from that home. The pitter-patter of tiny childlike feet running through it. Someone even reported seeing what looked to be a demon child staring at them through the windows. A death like that from a demon-possessed mother has made this home one of the most haunted places in Mexico. Number 2 on this list is La Posada del Sol. La Posada del Sol is a hotel that is located in the center of Mexico City. Calling it a hotel is a little bit of a stretch though, because at this point it is completely out of commission, covered in graffiti, and a shell of its former self. Even though the exterior of this building has seen far better days, the inside still boasts incredible architecture, making people wonder what could have been. With over 600 rooms, a casino, a theater, a human-sized chessboard, galleries, and much more, this place had aspirations of being the finest hotel in Mexico. That dream was never fully reached though, as construction of the hotel was never finished and had to be halted in 1945. Fernando Saldana Galvan was the man behind this unfinished beauty. He envisioned this hotel to be a centerpiece of Mexico City, a place that people would flock to from around the world, a true beauty that would stand the test of time. Because of this, he poured his blood, sweat, and tears into this place. Problem is that a hotel of this caliber doesn't get made with blood, sweat, or tears. It gets made with money. In 1945, the hotel's construction was stopped because Fernando's debt was insurmountable. The stress and anxiety of never finishing his hotel and not being able to pay off his bills got the better of him, and he hung himself in the hotel yard. After his death, rumors began to sprout about the true intentions of this hotel. Some people stating that Fernando was actually part of a cult and this site was meant to be used as a place for satanic rituals. Other unfounded rumors surfaced that Fernando had actually killed his wife and kids before taking his own life. One thing is certain though, he definitely left this hotel haunted after he died, and not just by his spirit either. A girl was said to have been murdered in the basement at this hotel in its early days, and her spirit still haunts the walls as well. There's an altar in one of the top rooms of this place that people say you must leave candy on. If you don't, then you will be haunted by her undead spirit even after you leave. Number 1 on this list is Santa Paula Cemetery. The Santa Paula Cemetery is located in Guadalajara. The initial purpose of the cemetery was to be a spot designated for those who died of influenza and other epidemics that were ravaging Mexico. In the many years that it's been active though, lore surrounding the spirits that could be potentially living there has exploded. One of its most notable spirits is that of a young boy who died when he was 10 years old. The boy's name was Nachito, and he died over a century ago in 1882. One evening, a massive storm was sweeping through Guadalajara. This was a problem for Nachito though, because he was deathly afraid of the dark, so much so that he had to have 2 torches lit outside of his window every evening. That night when his parents sent him to sleep though, the torches went out due to the storm, and the next morning when his parents came to wake him, they found him dead where he slept. The cause of his death was a heart attack, and it was confirmed that Nachito got so scared of the dark that he had caused himself to have a heart attack and died. They had the funeral shortly after and buried him in the ground, but the next morning when his grieving mother came to visit him, the coffin had been taken out of the ground. His body was still inside the coffin, so they buried him again, except the same thing happened. In fact, they repeated this process 9 times before realizing that he can't be buried underground because he is too scared of the dark. Therefore, they made a special above-ground stone coffin that would always have access to the light. However, it is said that even though this coffin was made, his spirit still haunts the area. Another famous story about this cemetery is in regards to a vampire. Locals say that a vampire was killed by some people who drove a stake through its heart and then buried the body at this cemetery. A while later, the stone marking that had indicated where the vampire had been buried was cracked and a tree was growing through it. They say that if that tree ever dies, the vampire will return and seek vengeance on the people in surrounding areas. This is so rooted in the lore there that they've even built a fence around this tree so no one can come in and wreck it. There are a bunch more stories of how haunted this cemetery is, with sightings of demons and ghosts that I sadly do not have time to cover in this video, but I highly recommend looking this place up if you want a scare.
Coming in at number 5, we have Tower of London. The Tower of London is most famous for housing the crown jewels. It was also known throughout history for housing some famous prisoners in their final days before execution. It has been the center of many historical events, so it's no surprise that it's haunted by the ghosts of the past. One of the most famous ghosts that haunts the tower is Guy Fawkes. As the rhyme goes, remember the 5th of November, gunpowder, treason and plot. I see no reason why gunpowder treason should ever be forgot. Every November 5th, British people hold a bonfire to remember the gunpowder treason. In 1605, Guy Fawkes attempted to blow up the Houses of Parliament. He was hoping to kill the king. His plan was foiled when one of his conspirators told the police of the plan that night before the explosion was going to take place. Guy Fawkes was taken to the Tower of London while awaiting his trial. He was sentenced to be publicly executed and brought out to the square of the tower. He spent his last days in captivity in the tower as well as passing away there. Since then, there have been sightings or whispers of Fawkes from those visiting the towers, especially around the 5th of November when his spirit is the most restless. He is not the only famous ghost who is stuck around the tower. There have been many sightings of Anne Boleyn. She is often seen walking around various rooms after closing by security. Others have seen her staring through the window of the room which she was once imprisoned. A couple of guests have entered that room and heard a distant sound of a woman crying for help. It is believed her spirit is stuck here since her life was ended so tragically. Coming in at number 4, we have Pendel Hill. Pendel Hill might seem like a nice place for a hike in Lancashire, but there is much more than that to it. Since 1612, the land has been haunted due to the actions of the townspeople. The Pendel witch trials are among the most famous of the witch trials in English history. There were 11 on trial for the use of witchcraft. They were accused for being responsible for the deaths of 10 people who had recently passed. Only one of the accused was found not guilty, the other 10 were to be executed for their use of witchcraft. Once they were found guilty, they were each hanged for their crimes and buried under the hill. There was one witch in particular who was feared. She was referred to as Alice Nutter. She was wealthier than the other witches and was seen to have the most power. She shocked the town with her complete silence during her trial. These 10 witches now haunt the area. The people of East Lancashire here remain cautious of the witches of Pendel Hill. It has been investigated by many ghost hunting teams. Once claimed that there are more than just the spirits of the witches in the area. They claimed there are also children and airmen who were bombed during the war. The area seems to attract tragedy and many have passed there. Locals refuse to go anywhere near the hill after dark as there have been so many sightings of the ghosts. Some have even seen the witches on the hill after dark. One local said they saw what looked like 10 women performing some kind of ritual. Could this be a tribute or the spirits of the witches attempting to communicate with the living? In at number 3 we have Theatre Royal. The Theatre Royal sits in London on Drury Lane. During the late 17th century the theatre was one of the leading theatres in all of London. There were many famous actors who performed at the West End location on a regular basis. The theatre grew in popularity after the Second World War when they pioneered musicals such as Oklahoma, My Fair Lady and Miss Saigon. It is now owned by the famous composer Andrew Lloyd Webber. Although it's no longer the most prestigious theatre in London, it is one of the first and the longest open. Today it is open with a production of Frozen. What a classic. But it is still one of the most haunted locations in London. There have been many people who have passed through the hall since it opened in the 1700s. There are many stories of tragedies that happened here and spirits that could never leave. Although there have been ghostly sightings, the performers see it as an omen of good luck for an upcoming performance. So they're not so much feared but more so welcomed before a show. The most famous ghost is the Man in Grey. He is a tall man dressed from the 18th century with a top hat and powdered wig holding a prop sword as though he was about to step on stage to perform. There is a story told about why he haunts the theatre. Apparently the Man in Grey was preparing for his performance when he was stabbed. By who? We will never know. He then walked up into a side passage next to the royal viewing box. He was walled in so thick that no one heard him scream. It is unclear why anyone wanted to do this to the man. His remains were found over 100 years later and there was finally an explanation for all of the sightings. So if you happen to see him during your visit, try not to get too scared. It means the show will go well. Go see Frozen, it's gonna be a bop. Coming in at number 2 we have Hampton Court Palace. The palace was built in 1514 for Cardinal Thomas Wolsey, the chief minister of King Henry VIII. When the chief fell out of grace with the king, he gave him the palace in an attempt to save face for his family. It soon became the king's favoured residence. He then commissioned to have the palace expanded. It is one of the only surviving palaces out of the many the king owned. The house is currently owned by Queen Elizabeth II and the Crown. Today the palace is open to the public and a major tourist attraction. The palace is well known for its ghosts. This was a key selling point when open to the public. They knew that the ghosts who lived within the walls would give the guests a visit to remember. One of the most seen spirits is that of Jane Seymour, who died in 1537. She was the king's third and most beloved wife. She had given the king the son he had longed for. After Prince Edward was born, Jane passed due to complications with the birth. While delighted to have his son, the king was devastated at the sudden loss of his perfect queen. A pale figure in a long white dress is reported to appear on the Silver Stick stairs, which once led up to the room in which Jane gave birth and then passed away. Jane is not only one of King Henry's wives that haunts the halls. Henry's fifth queen, Catherine Howard, had also been seen around the halls. Catherine was known for her wild ways. Her ghost is also known to be more vocal and sighted more often than that of Jane. Catherine was beheaded at the Tower in 1542. She was only 19 when she passed. She had been accused of adultery and treason. It is claimed that while she was being transported to the gallows, she broke free. She ran screaming through the halls, begging the king to have mercy on her. She never reached Henry and she would never see him again. It is said she now spends eternity screaming in anguish through those same halls. Coming in at number 1 we have Stonehenge. No one knows where Stonehenge came from. It has always been surrounded in mystery. Some archaeologists think it was created in 3000 BC to 2000 BC, but it's unclear how they would have the machinery to carve the stones or lift them into place. It is one of the most famous landmarks in the United Kingdom and is now protected to preserve it. It might be strange to believe now, but back in 1915 Stonehenge was up for public auction. Cecil Chubb had no intention to buy the landmark when he went to the auction that day. But when the bids were slow, he managed to win the land for $6,600. Although he had not planned on owning the land or the landmark, once he did, he wanted to restore it. It had fallen into neglect with its past owner and needed some maintenance. He decided that he would fence off the monument and begin charging 1 shilling for admission to pay for a guard and the restorations needed to restore it. There were a group of Celtic pagans named the Druids. They claimed that their people built the structure and used it as a place of worship. The group hoped to continue to hold their annual summer solstice ceremony there as they believed their ancestors did. The previous owner of Stonehenge had banned them for using it as it was on his land. This led the Druids to curse him. They said for as long as they're denied access to their sacred land, then the curse will follow the owner. Just 1 year after the curse, the owner lost his only son and heir to his fortune and land. 4 months later, he would pass away himself, leaving everything to his widow, who put the estate up for auction. Chubb was aware of the curse and did not want some fate to take his own family. He decided to gift Stonehenge to the British government, with one condition: that those who live near the monument visit it for free, as he did as a child. It is said the curse still remains, along with the ghosts of the ancestors of the Druids who were buried there long ago. They watch over the land to make sure their descendants are still connected and no one is mistreating the sacred monument. To this day, the British government does allow the Druids to perform their ceremonies each year, until 2019 when the lockdowns forced them to cancel any and all in-person celebrations at Stonehenge. The senior Druid spoke out against this warning, saying that this move would not end well for anyone connected to the land. Yoink.
Number 5, Gettysburg. For Americans, the Battle of Gettysburg is probably one of the more famous battles in your history. It was an incredibly bloody battle that marked a turning point in the war towards the Union, as it was a heavy victory over the Confederacy, halting the moving invasion towards the north. And that's about all the American history I remember from school. Unfortunately though, grand victories come at an impossible cost, and as such, countless lives were lost. Well, not entirely countless. Historians have estimated that the number hovers around 50,000 soldiers killed. With that in mind, with 50,000 lives cut short amidst a torrent of screams, bayonet jabs, musket fire, and cannons blasting off, is it any surprise that some of these tortured souls haven't quite been able to move on just yet? Gettysburg isn't just a place where history comes alive, it's a place where it hasn't quite fully died. The town of Gettysburg is filled with historical tours and ghost tours you can go on, with visitors and locals claiming that just about anywhere you go, you'll find something mysterious happening. Phantom shots, battle cries reverberating out hundreds of years later. One of the more haunted points of interest is the Devil's Den. I mean, obviously, listen to the name. A particularly bouldery stretch of land in Gettysburg that was host to a brutal battle where 5,000 soldiers died alone. Visitors claim that they can see the apparitions of the soldiers still at war. One particularly freaky Gettysburg story that they probably leave out of the history books is the story of Jenny Wade. Jenny Wade was a civilian killed during the Battle of Gettysburg when a stray bullet struck her while she was baking bread. The house where she lived, now known as the Jenny Wade House, is believed to be haunted by her spirit. Visitors and staff have reported hearing footsteps, doors opening and closing on their own, and the aroma of freshly baked bread, all attributed to Jenny's presence. Well, at least there's someone still making food for all those ghostly soldiers. If anyone's ever been down to Gettysburg, let me know if you've ever had a weird experience there. I would love to hear it. And if you're looking for more weird experiences of ghosts and all things supernatural, well, you don't have to book a plane ticket anywhere because you're in exactly the right place already. Make sure you hit subscribe so you can get all the latest on our scary stuff, and ring that little bell as well and you'll get up-to-date notifications when we upload. But do that at the end of this video, okay? Because I got 4 more scary battlefields coming for you right now. Number 4, Waterloo. The Battle of Waterloo, that's the one in Belgium, not the Kitchener-Waterloo area, was fought in 1815 and was a significant historical event for a few reasons. First and foremost, I think we can all agree the most important thing that came out of the Battle of Waterloo was that it inspired one of ABBA's most time-tested bangers. Secondly, and less important, it was a conflict that ended up ending Napoleon's impressive rule, ending the Napoleonic Wars. Just like the Battle of Gettysburg, this was a brutal battle that claimed the lives of thousands of soldiers on both sides. If you're learning anything from this video, it's that war is not great for the soldiers. One of the most famous ghostly legends associated with the Waterloo battlefields revolves around a spectral little drummer boy. According to the story, visitors and locals have reported hearing the faint sound of a drum being played in the distance, and it's said that this haunting sound resembles a military drummer echoing through the night. Some people claim that they see an apparition dressed in this uniform believed to be the ghost of a young drummer boy who lost his life during the battle. Another ghostly encounter is the soldiers' apparitions. Visitors claim that sometimes you can see shadowy figures dressed in period uniforms, marching across the fields or standing silently as if reliving battles. They're described as fleeting and ethereal, vanishing as soon as they are noticed. Well, you know, maybe ghosts get shy too when they're not not ready. As well, visitors to Waterloo battlefields claim that they have felt a profound sense of sadness and unease while walking through the fields and exploring the landmarks. Definitely, I feel like any place like this where you just know how many lives have been lost all in one little stretch of land, that would kind of make me feel some sort of way. Waterloo. Couldn't escape if I wanted to. How right Abba was. Number 3, the Bannockburn Battlefield. Our next entry on the list today is in Scotland, near the village of Stirling, and it's the Bannockburn Battlefield. A site of great historical significance for Scotland due to the Battle of, well, wouldn't you guess it, Bannockburn. The forces of King Robert of Scotland and King Edward II of England clashed, leading to a huge loss for the English, as 11,000 of their knights were cut down in battle. Now, this battlefield may not be as outright haunted as some of the other locations I've talked about so far, but the locals still say to keep your eyes peeled for spirits. Kind of like the drummer boy, there's a legend of a ghostly piper who is said to haunt this battlefield, and that he appears at dusk, playing his pipes and leading an invisible army across the field. Some witnesses claim that they can hear a faint bagpipe sound or even see a spectral figure dressed in traditional Scottish attire. He's forever marching with his troops, and let me just say, I don't think I could imagine anything half as haunting as a ghostly bagpipe that's playing forever. Imagine being forced to play the bagpipes for all of eternity. That's worse than any hell could conjure. Visitors to Bannockburn Battlefield also report seeing ghostly figures dressed in armor. They are described as being transparent or glowing and are believed to, well, be the spirits of knights who fell in battle. Witnesses have described seeing these apparitions while walking near monuments and memorials dedicated to battle, and claim they can even hear the echoes of it, clanging of steel, and let's be real, probably still playing those bagpipes louder than anything you can hear. I can't imagine how annoying a ghost bagpipe player is, and I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get over that. Number 2, the Borodino Battlefield. The Battle of Borodino was fought on September 7, 1812 during Napoleon's failed invasion of Russia and was one of the grisliest conflicts of the war. Are we surprised that 2 different battlefields from the Napoleonic Wars are considered haunted? I'm not particularly, because that guy invaded a lot of places, and I'm willing to bet that emotions were probably pretty high around him, and I would say the vibe was just probably off. So I'm not surprised that enough emotionally tormented souls have spawned so many ghosts. The village of Borodino is about 70 miles west of Moscow and has a reputation for ghostly legends and reported hauntings. Why don't you pop your ears open and take a listen to some of the stranger things that have come out of the Borodino battlefield. According to local legends, on the right nights, particularly the anniversary of the battle, witnesses claim to hear the sounds of galloping horses and the clash of sabers as the cavalry rushes in. Some people take it a little step further and say they've even seen apparitions of the cavalry charging, as if they're reenacting the battle. You guys can't get over the war. You fought it once already. You don't have to fight it for eternity. You don't have to keep fighting it. It's over. It's done. It happened. There are people too who claim that they've encountered a spectral figure dressed in a white medical coat, believed to be the ghost of a surgeon who worked on the wounded during the battle. Witnesses describe seeing the apparition wandering through the battlefield, appearing and disappearing amidst the ruins and remnants of war. Would absolutely hate to be a ghost surgeon. You're gonna try and repair other ghosts. I don't know if you can do surgery on a ghost. I think that might be for life. I think if you get injured and then turn into a ghost, you're just gonna have to deal with like a big hole in your tummy forever. But I don't know. I'm not a ghost. I wouldn't know. Unlike some of the other entries that I've talked about on this list, there isn't like a huge culture for ghost tours in Borodino, so if you do end up going up near there, you're gonna be on your own looking for the ghosts. But maybe they're just not as spiritual there, or maybe they don't want to talk about it. Maybe they don't want to invite people to come see it. And number 1, Normandy. The battle at Normandy is probably one of the most well-known battles in the history of human armed conflict. You've probably seen it play out in countless movies. You've probably played the invasion in 1,000 video games. June 6th, 1944 was D-Day. The horrifying, legendary military operation resulting in an estimate of 20,000 casualties. It was one of the most painful battles of the Second World War, so it is no surprise at all how haunted Normandy is said to be. Now, Omaha Beach is one of the more infamous landing sites during the D-Day invasion. It's said that the spirits of fallen soldiers still linger around in the area. Visitors have reported hearing all the usual haunting sounds, disembodied voices, cries for help, artillery, screams, and again, Particularly bold claims say that you can see ghastly apparitions of soldiers on both sides of the conflict still dressed in full uniform. The town of Falaise was the strategic location during the Battle of Normandy, and there have been wild reports of people saying that they see a phantom tank roaming around the streets, claiming that you hear the rumble of tank tracks and witness the apparition of a tank disappearing into thin air. Some believe it represents the spirit of a tank crew lost in the battle. This is a new one for me. I don't know if I've ever heard of a machine ghost. I've heard of people ghosts, definitely, but I've never heard of a tank ghost, and it does make me wonder if can all vehicles be ghosts? Are there car ghosts? Are there plane ghosts? I'm not sure, but I'd love to know. Now, these are just a few examples of the many, many ghostly stories and hauntings associated with Normandy. The region's intense conflict and sacrifice has left a sort of permanent mark on the area. You know, it's kind of hard to separate Normandy from that big thing that happened there. So many visitors do report feeling kind of eerie and unexplained when visiting these historic sites. I think you walk around an area like that, you're just thinking about a lot of death. It's definitely on your mind. So whether or not these encounters are truly supernatural or all just a result of powerful emotions while you're thinking about war, well, that's up to your interpretation. And that's about all she wrote for this one, my ghouls and goblins. Thanks so much for watching. You keep on creeping on now, and I'll see you in the next one, okay? Take it easy now.